So I'm going to call the San Mateo County Harbor Commission meeting to order. This is the April 30th, 2015 special meeting. And we are located today at Granada Community Services District at 504 Avenue, Alhambra. Can we get a roll call?
Commissioner Bernardo, Commissioner David, here. Commissioner Mateusz,
Here.
Commissioner Paramano,
Here.
President Brennan.
Here. And now it's time for public comment. The public may speak on topics not on the agenda for up to 3 minutes each. And we don't have any speaker slips for.
Well, I have to one for that.
Oh, okay. Let's see. Oh, one. We'll just consider that.
Oh, thanks.
Public comment. Lisa Ketchum.
Thank you. Lisa Ketchum, Lost Beach. I just one thing. Was surprised to see. So we got this agenda out yesterday. Fairly robust agenda with a large packet, and I just don't want to get anybody in trouble. But the camera guy knew about this a week ago, so I was just wondering if this could have been used for that kind of time.
And I'm just going to follow up with a point of information about that. We had a budget workshop in South San Francisco at the Oyster Point Yacht Club, and it was decided that it would be helpful to have a second one on the coast side, and so that's kind of how this meeting came to be. We normally only have one budget workshop per budget cycle, so instead of having one this year, we're having two. And then there were some additional items that came up that needed to get on the agenda, so I hope that helps explain. And in the future, we'll try to give the public more notice. But it is a special meeting, so we're required to give 24 hours notice. So next, we have item 1, which is discussion and possible action response to letter from civil grand jury, and we have a report from the acting general manager, Scott Brindy.
I was asked to put a letter together, and you have it before you.
So the district received a letter from the civil grand jury. It was mailed on March 27th, 2015. However, it wasn't forwarded to the board until, I don't know, a week or so after that. And the letter essentially says that the grand jury is following up on the will to implement and will to study type responses from the 2013-2014 grand jury report to determine the current status of those responses. So in other words, there were some outstanding items that the Harbor District was responsible for following up on with the grand jury. And they are basically asking for a status update. They'd like to get an estimated time for completion, and they list 2 grand jury reports, one with regard to websites for special districts, which the gist of that was essentially transparency and providing the public with accurate information. That was a report that went out to all special districts. So they're asking us to follow up on response 1, 4, 5, 6, and 7. And then also they have noted the grand jury report specific to the Harbor District, and that was a 2013-2014 report, as was the website report. And they've asked for follow-up on response 5, 6, 7, 9, and 11. And they've asked to get a response no later than April 30th, 2015, which is today. So the district has not followed up on this letter, and I felt that it was urgent that we do that. So I asked to have a letter to the grand jury included in this board packet in hopes that we could approve the letter and get the letter sent today so that we can meet their request to have a response by April 30th. The letter Scott, do you want to explain the letter since you wrote it?
The general intent is basically to say we'll get back to this. With the transition of the move, the retirement of Peter, Marietta was actually keeping track of all this, and she's left as well. So basically, it's to pull this back together again as soon as we can.
So the letter just essentially says that the district is in, sort of a transitional state right now, and we're in the midst of conducting a search for a permanent general manager, interim general manager. We're in the middle of our budget process, and our staff, 4 of our staff members are relocating to a new office space. So it's basically saying, we hear you and thank you for the letter, and we will be getting back to you ASAP. So that's sort of the gist of it. So does anybody have any discussion or comments? Yeah.
Well, first of all, I want to say that I don't feel that I could adequately prepare for this meeting today. The agenda, the meeting was intended as a budget workshop, and when the agenda came out yesterday, there were 6 more items on the agenda, and the agenda packet was about 100 pages big, and having a full-time job, I have no chance to basically get all the information I need to make good decisions on these items, and I would really like to urge commissioners that call special meetings to consider that. And even though the requirement to post this meeting is 24 hours, if there are that many items on the agenda, it does not allow for commissioners to prepare and get the information they need for well-informed decisions. And I think staff needs adequate time to finalize the agenda and the agenda packet and to post it. And when we have 7 items on there, it should definitely be more than 24 hours. However, I did have a chance to look at the letter, and I had a couple of minor comments in the 3rd row of the first paragraph. It definitely needs to say August 11, 2014, and second on August 22nd, 2014. And then I have a couple minor comments and typos that I can just give to Emily or Scott. We don't need to use meeting time for that.
My one recommendation I would make is if there's any changes, so we stay on the date of today getting it submitted, is I will need to go back after this meeting and make the corrections and then send it out tonight. If I can have the permission of the board president to sign for her on this letter, if those are correct, whatever corrections come out of the commission, we can get it out on time for the request.
So given that we want to get it out to meet the deadline, I think we need to go through what the corrections are.
That's what I was saying.
So Nicole, you see
I can take your notes even, but I think I saw what you written down there.
Yeah, there needs to be space between the end of that sentence and shortly.
Got it.
Then on line 6 of the first paragraph, there shouldn't be a comma between November and 2014. The same for July 2015.
Got it.
Second paragraph. It sounded a little awkward. It should be our, because we're showing the sentence with we anticipate, so it should be our new administrative office
Got it.
completed, and then the at the end.
Okay.
That's all I had. Oh,
Thank
no,
you.
and the other side public should not be capitalized.
do any other commissioners have any changes to the letter?
I have comments on the letter. I would like to say that the way that this, or the timing of this letter is very unfortunate, because this is a response to the civil grand jury, and if I just having read the letter today for the for the first time, I would say that, geez, not much has been done by the Harbor Commission and complying with the recommendations of the grand jury report. And I find it's not impressive to know that the president of this board has been sitting on this letter since March 27th and has decided until yesterday or today to issue a response to the civil grand jury. And I feel like this response is shallow. It does not do the commission and the district justice. It does not do the purpose of the civil grand jury justice. And I just feel that I think that there are other things that have been done. There are things that have not been done. But because we're going through a transition, you know, in a way that it's these transitions that have really created the investigation or the inquiry by the civil grand jury. So I am not going to be supporting this letter.
So I'd just like to point out that Commissioner Paravano, you received the letter a couple of weeks ago when I emailed it to the full board, and so did the staff. So you have been sitting on this letter for several weeks. Do you have anything constructive that you would like to do?
No, with all due respect, this letter was written to the president of the board. And
It was
it's up
emailed to you.
It's up to the president of the board to carry out the dutiful responses to anybody that has inquiries to the district.
So staff wrote the response. Do you have anything constructive that you'd like to ask the staff to do to change the letter? You've been sitting on the letter for weeks.
I have not been sitting on this letter.
Yes, you have. You have had the
This is the
letter.
first time that I see this letter.
The letter was emailed
This
to you.
is the first time that
Well,
anybody has seen this letter.
If you don't
not
read
just
your
me.
email, we can't help you.
We're talking about two different
You
things.
need to read your email.
We are talking about two different things,
You
Mr.
need
President.
to read
You
your
understand me?
email. You need to read your email. You're responsible for reading your email. Any other comments? Okay, is there a motion?
A motion to send this letter on and buy us time. I acknowledge to the grand jury that our eyes are on this topic and we're doing our best to respond with it in a timely fashion, best we can with this plates as full as they are at the present time.
I second.
Roll call?
Commissioner Bernardo, Commissioner David,
Aye.
Commissioner Mateusz, Commissioner Paravano,
No.
President Brennan.
Aye.
Yeah, I need to add one item, which was the signature piece, if I'm sending it out tonight.
That's fine.
Okay.
Yeah. So next we have item 2, which is the fiscal year 15-16 budget workshop, which will be presented by our finance director, Deborah Galarza. And I'm going to move so I don't block the presentation. Let's see it.
I do have some comments before we start about special meetings as well, because there was a special meeting for the finance committee on Thursday, and on Thursday the 23rd. And on Tuesday, when I got into the office, there was a request of $19 items to fulfill before. So it's Tuesday at 3 because we had a move meeting. And so I had part of Tuesday, all day Wednesday, and the meeting was at 6:30 to gather information for 19 items. Staff does work very hard to fulfill the request of the board, and it took us over 20 hours. And that meant everybody stopped what they were doing, and we prepared everything for the finance committee. Again, we had a finance committee yesterday, and on Monday I received more items for the finance committee yesterday. And So again, we kind of stopped what we're doing and here we are today. But I think I have a little frustration because during yesterday's finance committee, you know, there was discussion about how there's a reserve account for the office building, and how do we know, and whoever tells us, and we don't know anything, and we're not getting financial information. And that was item 11 on their Thursday night packet. So I don't know if it's not being read, but we're spending an awful lot of time gathering this information, and it does get frustrating because, you know, if we're spending 20 hours gathering it, I think it's due diligence to read it. Otherwise, maybe we need to come up with a plan for special meetings to give staff time and the receivers of the information time to read and process it. So I just wanted to just say it was, I don't even know what the word is, disappointing that we worked so hard and then they said they didn't get it and it's in their packet. So with that being said, they wanted another budget workshop, and the budget has changed quite a bit since the initial workshop on the 15th. Most specifically, is, you know, budgets are an opportunity for the board to fulfill the mission of the district by their spending. You know, numbers can change throughout the year, but there's kind of been just a change in this year's budget. And that is past budgets all the way up until this year have been on an accrual basis, which means we include depreciation. That is one way to do it, but some of my colleagues have said that it kind of creates a little confusion among public members about, you know, accrual versus non-accrual. Just do cash. What is the money coming in? What is the money going out? That's very understandable. So what we've done is we've changed our budget from a accrual method to a cash method. And that is the biggest point of that. Is this on? Does anyone have any questions about the change?
I do have a quick question, because it was my understanding that you're not supposed to do a cash budget when you have 8 staff.
No, budgets don't have, like, financial statements have regulations. They have, you know, GASB, GAAP, everything else that says this is how you have to do it to be compliant. And the reason they do that is so that if you take our financial statements and compare them to another district, you have like items, because we're required by regulation to post things in certain accounts so that you can match things. And budgets don't have any requirements. So it doesn't matter, you know, they have cash plus accrual, modified accrual. There's all kinds of different ways we can do it. And you know, but let's see how this works this year, and if we like it, we continue it. If not, we can, you know, there's always options to change. But I was addressing the needs of, actually a city manager had talked to me about our budget, so I was listening to his input because he is a director of finance of 15 years experience, so, you know, yeah, so yeah.
Thanks for explaining that.
Sure. I have added some sections from yesterday's budget workshop. Some people have, you know, said that for them numbers are kind of goobly gobble, and that graphs and pictures are more, they can interpret that better with more visual basis. So I did that. The reserves that they said they hadn't seen that were in the packet, I included in the budget. And So what we have now is, so this is our cash-based budget. Everything coming in, everything spent, will be ahead by $14,225. But what I want to warn you is if anybody is going to take our financial statements and say at the end of 15-16, it's negative, it's positive 14,225, there's adjustments to go from a cash basis to a accrual basis financial statement. So you cannot tie it like you could in previous budgets. Wow, this is hard to see. So what this is revenues by departments. And this is just a summary. I think that future pages give a little more light into the trends that are set by these. So these are just salaries and payroll benefits. And as you can see, we subtracted out depreciation on the bottom line, and I tried to tie it all with colors on your first page. And we added the interest and actually we added the principal of the debt. Because we actually write a check for the principal and the interest. So again, everything ties out to the bottom line. Are there any questions on the summary? Okay. This I think we don't need to read. I think you have time. I posted it online as well. Basically it talks about the changes that I discussed with you earlier. This is a new section. This is the graphs. And what I tried to do is ask the question, where does the district's money come from and where is it spent? So you can tell that the majority of our money comes from taxes and from user fees. And then what do we spend it on? We spend it on salaries, operating, debt service, and capital expenses. I do want to make a comment about capital expenses. Is when you talk about capital expenses, you have to think about things like you know, if I spend $710,000 on a house, because that's a capital expenditure, am I really in the hole? I'm not, because I now own an asset. What I've done is traded liquidity. So even though I have $710,000 to spend on a pier or a house, I'm not in the hole, and that's something that ends up on the balance sheet of a financial statement. We have to put it in the budget because the board approves our expenditures. But when that plays out in the financial statements, it's not an expense. You will not see an expense for that. How does Pillar Point do? So what I broke it down was just kind of the general fees. During our workshop yesterday, the members had stated that rather just rents and concessions, that going forward we kind of whittle it down a little more detail to say offloading fees and percentage rents and base rent, so that we kind of know what makes up that rather big number. So I'm hoping to get that actually done for this fiscal year, and then that way we would have a year trend and then work towards next fiscal year. And then we have, we spend money on salaries and benefits, operating, debt service, and capital expenses. Any questions?
Could you explain to people who weren't at the finance workshop in detail a little bit more about what kind of data you're going to be gathering and organizing related to leases and fees?
Yeah, so right now we have all of our rents and concessions in a subsidiary ledger in our marina billing program. So we actually track rents and concessions in the same financial software package that we have for berth fees. It's, how do I want to say? It's not easy to segregate out different, like passenger service fees and things like that. Because for so long, it's just been put into rents and concessions. But what I did was, I've done for other things, is I can create line items within the subsidiary ledger so that when our accounting tech gets a check for passenger service fees, they can, we charge passenger service fees, then we can roll up a report. Right now, when we roll up a report, we just see 430,000 for all tenants, for all commercial activity, not commercial activity permits, that's a little different. So that is, a laborious task, but if, that's going to help us analyze and try to make sense of our leases, that would be a good thing, especially since we have 3 leases outstanding that we need to negotiate. It's kind of hard to negotiate a lease when you don't know how you're doing with your other leases. So that's, definitely, an important thing that we need to do. And did that answer it, Sabrina?
It answers it, I understand it, but I'm not sure that the board is fully aware of the concern, which is right now, if we're trying to track somebody's base rent versus how much money they pay out in fees annually, we can't just send an email to staff and say, what's the story with this lease? What's the base rent, and how much do they pay each month?
Well, you can if you do 1 per week, or
Right,
1
so-
per every 3 weeks, so that we can, you're talking about, it's not hard to do. Everything is in there, everything is accounted for. Once a month, we do look at the birth rate. We have to track it for CPI. We send letters to tenants beforehand, letting them know that their CPI is going to be in effect March, April, May, what the increase will be. We verify their percentage rent. So it's not that we're neglecting what we're doing.
I'm not suggesting that you're neglecting it, but what I'm saying is if we wanted to look at a spreadsheet to get an idea of,
Well, like I said, it's a lot of work, and
So-
it can be done.
so it hasn't been tracked, but how much work do you think it would be going forward with the new fiscal year to track it?
I would have to, I can't tell you on the spot, I'd actually have to, see how long it takes to set up, and I can't answer you right now. I can email you though. It would take probably a good week, 40 hours full-time. Now Oyster Point, they receive mostly their birthing fees, their rents and concessions. The rents and concessions are lower than this year because the bait shop hasn't been rented out. So I don't know how long that lease is going to take to assign, so I did not estimate revenue for the first 6 months of the fiscal year, just to be cautious. The vessel abatement grant this is our best year. We got 143,800, and so we're hoping to work on getting unseaworthy vessels out of the water because of environmental hazards and other items stuff. And so, what I didn't do revenues and expenses for the commission or for the board, I mean for the commission or admin, because it's not, we don't really generate revenue. But the commission, I did want to point out that we pay 20%, 27% of their budget is in salaries, 17% is in operating expenses without legal, and legal takes up the rest of it in their budget. In 2013, we had $16,000 in legal fees for the board. In 2014, we had $137,000, and so far to date through March, we have $112,000. So, given that trend and that rate of increase, I actually increased it to $213,000. which is a lot of money.
Deborah, I have a question. With
Yeah.
legal,
Yeah.
it used to be that in the budget, at least I think it was back when we had a different finance director, that it specified legal for the various locations, of course, including the commission.
It does. It does in the budget, you'll see, when we get to the line items.
Okay, but it doesn't in these charts.
Because legal was not such a big percent of our budget.
So it's just a sliver.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
Yeah,
and
go
the maritime attorney costs are. included?
That's in, maritime is the boat. So, so that one's in, Oyster Point Legal.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, this was a fun slide because we have this total, taxes and non-operating revenues that we receive of 5.5 million. And so I kind of like making this graph because it really kind of told a picture about where are we using that money to cover our, our, I don't like the word deficit, but, I guess I have to use it, deficit. So you can see that Pillar Point's 40%. And that, like I said, that's partially larger because Pillar Point has more capital expenditures in their budget, just because of the wear and tear and being 100% occupied. And that's one of the reasons. And then Oyster Point is about 1.4, admin is about the same, and then commission is about 7%.
One thing
Yeah.
I'd like to mention too, just is that, if today Oyster Point was 100% or 90 to 100% occupied, the revenue's gonna go up, but you also, like Deborah just said earlier, you're also gonna have more wear and tear, more replacement, more work on the operation of the site because you have more people using the site. So, it's all great to get I'm all for raising our occupancy, but just to remember when one action, you have a reaction with it.
Yeah. So, did anyone have questions up to this point on the graphs or,
I have one more question
Sure.
about legal fees. So a lot of the fees are designated towards the commission, but are for costs related to staff, management staff. So have they always been slotted in with the commission, even if it's a management staff related fee, or how does that work out?
the way it works out is, the Hanson and Bridges, I have asked him to, rather than send me a large 15-page bill, is to send me one bill for Oyster Point, one bill for Pillar Point, admin, and commission. And so what happens is the lawyer determines what he's working on and then charges it to that invoice. And I think that takes away, any confusion because he's telling us, this is what I'm working on and this is what what it's charged to.
So it's easy to get a spreadsheet together that shows the way that he's divvying up his fees. Is that accurate?
Well, yeah. So as far as reserves go, I don't know if we have this on tomorrow, May 6th agenda, the quarterly investment report. I don't know. Well, anyways, I'm working on the quarterly investment report. And so I took this estimate based on this March number, that we have close to 16 million. If we add 14 to that, we have the 63. And so here's where, the board has, the restricted for debt service is a legal requirement. That cannot be changed. And underneath the estimated reserves, I gave you all the classifications, and that's from GASB 54, about how we need to describe our reserves. There's an emergency reserve fund, and you can read the other funds. And I'm working, actually, Sabrina and I are talking, because I did put this on here, a deposit of $794,000 for our sale of the lot just remains in unassigned. So in years past, I know when we sold property and things before, we used to put it towards the reserve for the district office. So I'm just trying to find the resolutions and memos and everything we prepared to do that, because I think the board would probably want to legally restrict that so it's not used on any operating expenses.
And
But, yeah, go ahead.
just wanted to thank you for including this, because this is exactly what we did talk about in the Finance
Right.
Committee meeting, and this was the kind of information that the committee was hoping to receive, and I appreciate you putting this together for us.
Oh, sure, no problem. So that's just a little picture. That is total cash reserve, so that includes restricted. So, even though it says we have close to, 16.3 million, we can't spend all of that because of our restrictions. So, revenues, I've added this column to the right of the preliminary budget. And so what it is, so for every budget, we have our actual budget and then we have an amended budget. And I only include the amended budget because that's the most current budget we have. And that includes when we amend the budget to increase for, some like emergency repair or something like that. So what I did was said to myself, well, we have this amended budget, and then we have the budget for 15-16. Where are we at? And so for birth fees, I have a negative 5%. And the problem I had is this was so kind of rushed, as I didn't get to include items through March 31st. And anytime you have more data, you can make more accurate forecasts. I would probably change a negative 5 to a positive number, if anything, because, Pillar Point is consistently busy. Whenever I go there, there's people looking for slips. We have a lot of paperwork that comes through finance, so I know that things are going on there. So that would change. And then that was pretty much it.
Can you explain what you mean? I'm not understanding you.
What's that? Understanding what?
What is it that you're suggesting you would change?
No, I'm just saying my preliminary budget estimate for 1.588500 for birth fees is
Yeah.
probably low,
Oh, okay.
especially given the trends we've been having. And I looked on the Department of Fish and Wildlife Game website, and they're predicting an even better salmon year this year than last. So, I have to look at all the different information, economic information, and I think I'm low on that. That's all I know. Like I said, we can read those. Oyster Point is well, Scott, Oyster Point is Oyster Point. It continues to be about 67%
I think since I've been
occupied.
here, I started doing the dashboard, which you
It's
see
kind of
once a month in the board reports, and it's always between it started out about 55 when we first started doing
Yeah.
the dashboard. We're up about 60, 65, depending on the season.
And we've put, I know the board has approved several incentive items, like if, you bring someone on and you can, but that's not really moving our number. It's just, if you look at there's a great picture right next to Scott's old office in Pillar Point that shows, there's Oyster Point and then there's Brisbane and Coyote Point. Basically, the competition is right next door. So-
Oyster Cove.
Oyster Cove, sorry.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
the biggest problem with our Oyster Point is that, it's a competition you're dealing with is one, just the fact you have 3 marinas all side by side.
Right
pretty
there,
much,
yeah.
all within line of sight. And then the second part is, Brisbane claims they do not do liveaboard, yet they have what they refer to in the marina business as ski boards. And they have a new harbor master there who is working really hard since he came on board, just because he has so many sneaker boards, which are, we charge for liveaboard, and we have a capacity of 10% for liveaboard. by them not following that rule, they're full.
Yeah.
And Oyster Cove has the same situation. And so, yet it might not be sneaker board as much there. But the intent though is that, you know, I think it's a rate issue and it's also a, you know, where people are trying to find a place to live.
Yeah. There's, you know, okay. So, pillar point expenses, the biggest expense really is, the cost of health insurance. It goes up, I don't know, between almost 5 and 10% a year. And so we have that additional cost. What's offsetting those costs are, we do have, I think now we're up to 1, 2, 3, 4, and I know of maybe the 5th person leaving the district. And what that does is that brings in new people at our 2-tiered plan. So the 2-tiered plan means you still make the same amount of money, but where we save money is you are now in PECRA, which is 6.25% cost to the employer for retirement, and you are given less time off, so you earn less PTO, so that's not an expense we have to pay. And so we're seeing this kind of a change where even though other costs are going up, this 2-tiered plan is actually working where we're saving money. I want to talk about bad debt a little bit.
Deborah, could you back up and,
To the slide before?
well, I don't need to see the slide, 'cause-
Oh.
but I hear you guys talk about the 2-tiered plan, and I don't really understand it.
Oh, well, the MOUs are online, and if you, they do talk about them. And so what it is, it's like I said, it's a 2-tiered plan not aimed at salary costs, but benefit costs. So people earn less vacation time. They are put into a CalPERS plan by law now, which is called PECRA, which is 6.25% that they have to pay and 6.25% the employer has to pay. So there's a cost savings in just those 2 items. That's
And
what I was saying.
how many employees do we have in that program versus the other program?
I would want to say about 9, but I can email you the exact number.
9, and which one?
Well, I know for sure that there is 1 in the Teamster, or maybe, well, 1, 2,
Just an
you know what?
estimate.
I don't know. I'd have to double check. I would say 9 total, and I can't tell you divided by how many. But I can email it to you.
Thank you.
So what I wanted to talk about is bad debt expense, especially because next meeting or the next meeting after that, we're going to have the bad debt expense come to the board. And this has really been a cleanup year. I've worked with John Draper and
Which page are you on?
28 of 46.
28.
Thank you.
I'm talking about the line under advertising, bad debt expense. So what I want to tell you about bad debt expense is it's going to be large for 14-15, close to 95,000. The reason I had that estimate in was when I took over, you know, I had to work with a lot of tenants and a lot of people that had been in the harbor for several years. I mean, one of the accounts we're going to write up is account number 1. What happened was, you know, I had to call them up and say, I'm sorry, you're not paying your slip. We need you to pay the slip, or we need you to move your boat so we can put someone in that would like to pay their slip. And so this has been a year-long project about getting boats out, especially at Pillar Point, because it's 100% occupied. If you can't pay your bill, you need to leave. And so what ends up happening is When they leave something called bad debt, which means they haven't paid their bill. In the past, what we used to do is put their name on a board, kind of like when you walk into a liquor store and they had a check that just was posted that bounced. But there's no incentive to that, because what happens to you? It doesn't matter. So what I implemented, and with the help of Emily Cooper here, is we have a two-stage plan. The first is you go into collections, and we have a collection agency, and that actually hits your credit report. So if you don't pay your bill to the district, guess what? Your credit is going to be hit. And so that gives more incentive through them to pay the bill because they want their credit clean. If you still don't do that, and you still don't want to pay, we are able to sign up for the Intercept program, which is through the state. And what that is we send that debt to the state, and if somebody has a tax refund due, we have a lien on their refund, and we'll get our money before they get their money. So, you know, even though it's a big number to write off coming up, it's because we're trying to A, clean up, and B, set procedures so that people will take paying their bill more seriously.
And just to kind of add to that, you know, Deborah's team has done a great job on that, because it's, you know, it's both the derelict boats and those issues and getting rid of that, but also getting the people to pay. Because once you have one person not paying, there's a group that'll hear about it and more not paying, or they'll be late, and it continues, and it just snowballs. And so you really have to focus on quick attack, get it done, get it handled. Otherwise, it just gets worse. And it has its other issues with it. Usually, if someone's not paying, there's other issues we got to deal with too. Whether it's a boat that's doing other kind of problems. So we want to make sure that we have good payers and good customers.
And I actually had one tenant who had, just kind of not paid, and finally he was promising a payment plan, and things had, weren't progressing. And I finally said, someone else has to hold your debt other than the district. I can't, you keep saying you're gonna pay, but you're not gonna pay, so you need to promise someone else you're gonna pay. And his mother called with a credit card payment of close to $15,000. So that was a great write-off. I was worried about that one, because that would have sent us over the top.
So I have a question. So you said we're close to $1 million for this fiscal year?
$1 million?
How much did you say?
$95,000.
Oh, $95,000. And how much are you anticipating for next year? Or you think it's going to be less?
Yeah, I have $20,000 less at Pillar Point, and we'll get to Oyster Point. But I'm hoping to have 31% less to write off at Pillar Point, because now we have these processes in place. Capital projects will really we don't need to really spend time on this page because it's all summarized on a separate page. With Oyster Point, the same thing about salaries in the two-tiered. I'm hoping that debt expense will go down 23% with Oyster Point. And the reason that the contractual services professional is down 57% is that's where the strategic plan is expensed for this year. Admin, we needed to add to overtime because we have a lot of requests that we are doing all at one time. So I wanted to do this, and this might change. It might be a low number, but for now, I'm estimating 8,000.
What page is that?
36 of 46.
Could you explain how carryovers work for the board and for the public?
Can I do that when we get to capital?
Sure.
Okay, because yeah, that's a good question. Okay, so for admin, there's not much going on. Harbor Commission, we already talked about, legal, so we don't need to go over that again. And I will say that for, health insurance, now, the board has voted that any, newly or re-elected commissioners will not get health insurance. So that would only leave the health insurance cost for the one, commissioner that had the termination benefit for their, I don't want to say sibling, for their, son.
I have a question about the admin expenses. There's nothing there for legal. I thought that we had a designated, this
It's
is
under
page-
office equipment on page 37 of 46.
It's right in the middle.
If you see office equipment, there's legal services.
Oh, I see. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so capital improvements, we had a really great discussion at our budget workshop yesterday about smoothing out capital expenditures over 5-year plans. And that is a wish and a want, and it takes time. But I think it's very important because then you have more of a plan about where, about the big ticket items and how you're gonna expense them over year to year. So that was really great. And what came out of that also is, people asked about encumbrances. And so what an encumbrance is, let's say you have $1 million in your budget for capital expenses. And you decide that you're gonna build, I don't know, a house or an office building. So you want to spend, you go to contract and that contractor says, that house is gonna cost you $700,000. What we do in government is we create an encumbrance. And what an encumbrance does is it holds that money. So when you look at your budget, if you were to pull up your budget for that capital item, it's only gonna show $300,000 available. So basically it holds that money only for that project. And what happens is, as payments come in towards that project, you start bleeding out your encumbrance. What happens is, at the end of the fiscal year, you have a remaining encumbrance. And so every year, I would say close to probably August, end of August, we have all the payments in towards those encumbrances. And then when we close our books, those encumbrances roll over to the next fiscal year. When it rolls over to the next fiscal year, it has that $700,000, but what also comes with it is or let's just say it has $500,000 now because you spent something. What comes over with that encumbrance is its budget. So it doesn't affect this year's budget, but what will happen is it goes into the amended budget as an encumbrance, and the budget also comes over. So it's a way to track your contracts. And I will pat myself on the back, because when I started in 2005, they did not have a purchase order module. Everything was done in Excel, and you had to know and track Excel. And I came from the city of Millbrae, and I said, how can a government agency not have encumbrances or purchase orders? So I called our software solution, and we purchased the module, and so now we have the stuff. That's me with that. And that's the glossary. Any questions? Yeah.
If I wanted to get more information on some of our non-revenue, non-enterprise expenses, where would I look for? I'm going to give you a list. I don't need an answer now, just a rough one. I'm not trying to put anybody in the spot. We put money towards the Resource Conservation District. We've got an oil recycling center. We're active in recycling. A lot of people in this whole surrounding area take advantage of our dumpsters, as our harbor masters can tell us. We've got a lot of West Trail and restroom expenses.
Yeah.
And you've also got the labor expense associated with all those non-enterprise things. Where do we put that in the budget or?
It's in operating, even though it's non-operating. We'd have to, we'd have to do cost accounting. We'd have to completely change the way we do things, but,
So we better not do it this year.
no, please, not, we got a lot for this year, but, that's how you would do it, is you would do cost accounting, and then
Okay.
you would create, yeah.
Commissioner David, did you have something? So I know we have one speaker slip, so.
There's a second.
Oh, a second one.
My apologies.
I'm gonna go ahead and call the first one, which is Lisa Ketchum.
Lisa Ketchum, I'm a member of the Mid-Coast Community Council. The council wrote a letter last July on the subject of the strategic business plan, which has been postponed. Nevertheless, these comments I do think apply to your budget priorities. The three topics in the letter goals are to establish a consistent, realistic vision and follow through. The second, focus on timely and efficient maintenance of existing harbor facilities. And the two examples there were the West Shoreline Trail and Romeo Pier. And then the last item was to prioritize public coastal access and views, environmental protection, and responsiveness and cooperation with the surrounding community. So, the Harbor District has a long history of time and money spent on planning and permitting of projects that then there's been no money to build. The modified budget to deal with the deficit proposes design permitting of a number of projects without any plan for funding for construction. So until you figure out how to resolve this problem, I just would focus on essential repairs and maintenance of existing facilities. Also notice newer projects have been added to the capital budget before previously identified priorities had been followed through on. And specifically, the West Trail and Romeo Pier are long-standing urgent issues. I don't know the urgency of the fishing pier repairs, but they've been punted along the budget for years. The Harbor District was required to provide public coastal access at the West Trail and the fishing pier as mitigation for previous developments. They must be maintained. If the Harbor District is not capable of maintaining the West Trail and its parking lot, please reach out and negotiate with the county to take over that area. Thanks.
And next we have Martha Coyotes.
I think it was the last speaker slip.
Okay. Laura Stein.
Hello, I'm Laura Stein. I live in El Granada, and I'm speaking today for the Mid-Coast Community Council as well. I really want to speak in support of Lisa's comments. The points that she's emphasized here are pulled from a letter that the MCC sent to the Harbor District to the commissioners last summer. I was chair of the council at our July 2014 meeting, that was the 9th, where our members voted unanimously to submit this letter to the directors. And this was following an evening, a very long evening of discussion with the community. In addition, I can tell you, having served on the Mid-Coast Community Council back in 1999, these same issues, particularly the focus on repairs, maintenance, and fruition of existing facilities, I really ask you to focus on that because people were very concerned about that. I mean, this is how many years ago, back in 99. That, and I've sort of sat back and now being in this position again to see that all this money was spent on lots of plans, and there were lots of meetings held all around these plans and where these projects were going to take place, and yet nothing has happened. So I would urge the directors to please take a look at the points that Lisa brought up, and thank you for your time.
Thank you.
And just one follow-up, is there a chance for the benefit of the new commissioners that you could resend that letter to the board?
I could do that, but also it's on our website, right on the front page under focus topics. It's a little blurb on the Harbor District, and I think our last three, our most recent letters are linked there.
All right, thanks.
And Martha?
Yes, Martha Priapos with the local agency Information Commissioner LAFCO, and LAFCO right now is in the process of preparing a municipal service review that's going to actually incorporate a lot of the discussion that's going on now with the Finance Committee and with this commission as you adopt your budget. I want to first say, for the benefit of staff, that I once had to move my office for a remodel and prepare my budget and work on a couple projects at the same time, and I thought my head was going to explode. So my heart goes out to you on that. The budget I think you have before you now that has this broader picture, because it's got your reserves incorporated into what you're looking at, not just a one-year snapshot of what are your estimated revenues and what are your anticipated expenditures combined with your reserve, is a great starting point. I think there were a lot of items that were discussed, as Deborah said at the Finance Committee meeting yesterday, which are things that can happen in the future. They can't be incorporated into this budget, but they make a lot of sense. 5-year capital plan, which I think is incredibly challenging when you're talking about this kind of environment where you have a lot of just corrosion and wear and tear. It's very different than, say, doing capital for a parks department or something like that. But it's important, and then you can figure out how much you want to contribute to that annually, so you build this capital fund. And then the budget monitoring tools are something that I think staff can work on in the future, and the municipal service review may have some suggestions in that regard. So I would look at this budget as an improvement, certainly from what you looked at last time, because you're looking at your reserves as well, and so you're seeing your big picture. And I think it reflects a lot of hard work on the part of staff.
Thank you. And I just wanted to follow up on that comment with thanking staff for all of her work, especially our finance director, Deborah Galarza. There was a lot of 11th hour tweaking in the budget going on, and a lot of cooks in the kitchen with ideas for some last minute changes, and I think it really paid off. I find this budget a lot easier to follow, so I really appreciate that, and having more information about the reserves is helpful. There's just been a lot of changes here. More charts and graphs are always useful to give a quick overview, and I just think it's a big improvement. So I wanted to commend you for that. Your hard work has really paid off, and I feel a lot more confident about the budget. So.
Well, I think it's like you said, and we talked in the workshop, it's a working document. We'll just keep trying to make it better.
And I think there has been some really valuable input coming from through LAFCO, from members of the public who put in a lot of volunteer hours. The Finance Committee has been really committed to this, and we've only had 3 meetings so far, 3 public meetings. There has been a good amount of discussion about Finance Committee meetings during this item, and I just wanted to let the public know that all Finance Committee meetings are open to the public. They are publicly noticed on the district's website, and they are held once a month, and that's it's the third Thursday, right? Fourth Thursday of the month. And they are held during daytime hours. We were doing evenings, and now we're going to do daytime hours. We haven't set the new time yet. Going forward, after the district moves, the committee meetings will be held on the 3rd floor of 504 Avenue Alhambra, the building we're in right now. And
You mean the second floor?
I mean the second floor, sorry. We're on the 3rd, the second floor going forward. And we're excited about holding these meetings and having staff involvement and the public's involvement and really moving forward. So I just wanted to note that. Are there any other questions or comments?
Thank you.
Jessica.
Thank you.
Are we discussing this at some point? Or?
You can discuss it right now.
Okay. Well, I had some concerns when I looked, I appreciate staff's effort going into this, trying to reduce the amount of money we're spending for this upcoming year. But I do have, when I looked at the list of delayed capital projects, I have a lot of concerns about not just splitting the planning, design, and permitting.
Which page are you on?
I'm on the page that came in response to one of your questions. It says items 1 and 4 of the, it lists the delayed capital projects.
Oh, so it was in the finance packet?
Yeah.
Finance committee packet? Okay.
This page here.
I have it right here. It's item 1 and 4 of the finance committee packet.
And, you know, to avoid a Brown Act violation, there can only be 2 commissioners at the committee meeting.
No,
so-
that's actually not true. Anybody can show up, it's a publicly noticed meeting. More than 2 commissioners can show up, but you have to sit as a member of the public. And so you can't act as a commissioner during the meeting if you're not a member of the committee.
Okay, well, I didn't know that, that's good to know, but I was not part of the discussion, and maybe you have covered that at the finance committee meeting. But I was wondering if we should possibly explore other options, potentially taking out a bigger loan to finance the capital improvement projects that are, in my mind, absolutely necessary, and, you know, to avoid lawsuits or any other risk. For example, with Romeo Pier, I think the demolition of that project cannot wait and cannot be postponed, because if that pier collapses, when that pier collapses, somebody can seriously get hurt. And so I'm very concerned pushing that out. I'm also concerned for the West Trail, that construction project, to push that one out, because there is barely a chance for an emergency vehicle to go out to Mavericks if there is need for rescue right now. So I'm wondering if you guys have discussed it, or if that's something that we can discuss as a plan for now, to take out a bigger loan and finance these essential projects, and rather deal with regularly scheduled payments rather than the risk of further deferred maintenance.
We have talked in our committee meetings about the the Division of Boating and Waterways loan, and the possibility of doing a refi, or which we did do in 2005. You know, and it's not something you want to do frequently, but if there's a good reason to do it, it might make sense. And we have talked briefly about looking at other loan possibilities. And that's definitely something that the board should be discussing at some point. And I'm not sure that we have the information we need to really get into an in-depth discussion about that right now. But clearly, you know, the way I read this budget, we don't have the money to do a lot of capital projects right now. So if we were going to consider doing significant capital projects, we need to find the money. We would either need to cut back on some of the things we spend money on. You know, we would have to like pick through all of our spending and figure out where to cut stuff, or we would need to find more money, and that would be a pretty lengthy process in determining what we want to do there. So yeah.
I just wanted to say that, you know, the reserves section of the new budget does have reserves for things like emergency repair, where if the board felt that this was a hazard or something like that and deemed it an emergency, that they could utilize that reserve to pay for something, as well as a capital expenditure reserve. I mean, I'm just saying that, you know, if that's where, when you said find the money, that's where it is.
And with emergency reserves, that also is like, for example, if there was a major catastrophe that happened that wiped us out and wiped out our businesses, that we receive fees from, we would need to tap into that money in the event of some sort of, to kind of see us through if we were gonna collect FEMA money or whatnot. We would need padding in order to survive any kind of major catastrophe. So we have to balance those things, and it's something that, you know, could definitely do with a lot more discussion in my mind. I mean, we could have whole agenda items dedicated to that topic and looking at refi options versus, you know, I don't know, whatever financial options are out there for us. And we ought to be looking at, you know, grants as well. So I think there's just a lot to do there. But I guess what worries me is right now, our staff is really stretched thin, and we don't have a permanent general manager yet. And I know Scott's really looking forward to going back to being harbor master so he can do what he loves doing, which is work on capital projects, along with maintenance and everything else that goes on with all of those responsibilities. So I'm just kind of wondering, like, realistically, you know, we could certainly start looking into loans and refi, and maybe that's something the board wants to get, you know, start doing, because staff can only do so much, and maybe we can work with the finance director and finance committee meetings to take that to the next level, and I think that's sort of the agenda right now. And certainly board members can come to those meetings, and we can bring that back for board discussion. But without the leadership, you know, to help us see this stuff through, you know, we kind of need to get that in place. So, I mean, those are sort of some of the things I'm thinking about. Tom, I know you've been thinking about this a lot during our discussions at the committee meetings.
Well, some of it just comes into properly agendizing some of the revenue producing items, such as we've got several leases that we need to work on. We've got a lot of non-producing leases, and we just can't suddenly act on them without going through the public process and being transparent. That's going to be a source of some operating revenue right there.
And one thing to comment also, if we could, is that I think it's good to have a reserve of a certain amount. And I believe that even going out for a loan, most institutions that would provide the loans like seeing us having a reserve for those big emergencies if they occurred. So, you know, we need to establish also probably a real good boundary where we call the emergency reserve.
And we'll discuss it more, but, you know, you have to, you know, there's so many design and permitting items to know exactly how much you're gonna borrow. You don't wanna borrow money until you're ready to build, because you're paying interest on that. You're just sitting on it going, well, it's gonna take 6 months for the permit, while you're paying interest on that money. You really have to time your loans so that you are using the money to get the project done, not just having a loan outstanding.
That's a really good point, and I would not advise taking money for these repairs out of, I'm not even talking about construction, it's just, or new construction, it's just really just repairs of existing facilities. And I wouldn't
Which
advise taking,
facilities are you?
well, Romeo Pier or the West Trail or the fishing pier repair, anything that has public access that is a potential risk to public safety, I think we need to address. I would not like to take this money out of the emergency fund or the emergency reserves, because I know that we will need those for unforeseeable things like, you know, a tsunami or any other natural disaster. I think those were things, or are things, that have been lined up as pressing issues for a long time, and we need to be able to address those. And Deborah made a good point. We could start with the permitting and design process, and, you know, spend the money that we have, because that's in the tens of the thousands, and we can spend that money, and then further down the road, it will take 6 months or 8 months to get the permits. Then we can maybe spend some time looking into options for loans when it comes to the point where we actually can take care of the demolition of Romeo Pier. But I would really, really strongly advise to not push these out into the next fiscal cycle and address them with this budget as best as we can.
Well, I'm confused because it's my understanding that we have set aside money to move forward with permitting on those two projects. Is that correct?
It's in your budget.
It's in the
Yeah.
budget, so we've already included that in this budget.
The permitting, yeah.
Yeah.
But the actually demolition or the fixing or construction is not currently.
I thought you just said that you thought we should have the money for the permitting in the budget, which we do.
We have that, so we can move forward with that.
But what do you want different? I'm not understanding your point.
I don't want to delay seeing through with these projects. So I don't want to push that out. I want to get them permitted and see them finished.
Where do you want to get the money to see them finished?
Well, we just said that over the next 6 to 8 months where the permits are being worked on, we can look into options for loans to finance them.
Oh, so you're suggesting that we get a loan in 6 months to finance the project? You said you want to put another speaker. Look, you have two here, you could resubmit.
Thanks. I guess the point where I just want to clarify what I said earlier. Basically, there are a number of projects in that capital list that have done this and doing the planning permitting now and the construction is later. And so perhaps with some of those, with no knowledge of where all that construction funding can come up, maybe just leave some of them out entirely now and focus on the more urgent ones, the ones that have been sitting there longer. And then you can get some of the money from doing that.
So I just
Such as the remodel or the bathroom or whatever. Not to say that those projects are not good projects, but that when there's limited funds, you gotta pick and choose.
Okay, now I get it, people are buying for their favorite projects, and these are some of my favorite projects too. Like, I'd really like to see those two projects get done. However, we have budgeted for the permitting, and I also got the point earlier, which is don't waste money on permits on things that you're not going to follow through on, and that has been one of the issues or one of the criticisms of the Harbor District. But on the flip side of that, we know that we have to follow through with Romeo Pier, and we have to follow through with the West Shoreline Access Trail, and we need to follow through with West Shoreline Access Trail, like, in short order, in my opinion. Like, that's, I think, the number one thing that's got to get done, because we're so overdue on that. However, there's a process for finding the money to do the work, and there's a process for the permitting, and there's a budget process in front of us. The budget can be amended later, so because it says what it says right now, doesn't mean that, 6 months from now, if we have gotten through the permitting process, which I hope our staff is able to get us through. Right now our staff is so spread thin, I don't even know if that's going to happen, honestly. But if we were able to get through the permitting process, at that point, the district could reevaluate and move some money around. I mean, there's always the option to do that, correct?
Yes.
So this is not set in stone. This budget is like a living document, and it continues to change throughout the year. So it's not fixed, if that helps.
Well, there's also the issue of the West Trail. No matter what decision we make, without the final approval from the Army Corps of Engineers, we're not going to get that done. Same with Surface Beach. There's some things that we need outside agencies.
You mean the Coastal Commission?
Well, the Corps of Engineers. I'm not talking so much about the Coastal Commission. I thought it was Army Corps of Engineers we needed.
There's triggers where one approves, then the next approves, so it's
So
like domino.
yeah, we don't have those at this point.
Yeah, and I have that coming up on May 6th.
With our best intentions, without those approvals, we can't do anything here as a group. We need other people, the Department of Waterways, we'd love to get the money to do those projects in one fell swoop and refinance at a lower rate. The last time the Department of Boating and Waterways loan was refinanced, it took 4 years. We don't want to wait 4 years, but we want to get these projects done. Everybody is pretty much in agreement there, I can guarantee.
And there are opportunities to potentially refinance without going through the Division of Boating and Waterways, we could find other avenues for refinancing.
No, we can't.
We can't?
They have oversight on our money. Anything over $1 million, they have to approve. The only way you're gonna get out from DBA is if you pay them off and go somewhere else.
Well, okay, so then we'd have to take out another loan, pay them off, and be
Yes,
done
you
with it.
can't have a DBA loan and go find money other places. DBA will not approve that.
So then it makes sense that we would explore other options for loans and then try to get out of that loan.
And especially, you know, we're at 3 or 4 years left in our loan, so we're really at principal only. I mean, interest is pretty minimal, so it would make sense to pay it off.
So
And
it's-
if you want, I can call them and do an informational report on what it would be or what it would take to pay them off. I know I read the contract and there is no prepayment penalty, so that's.
That would be helpful, and I know that's something that the Finance Committee is going to be asking for. And I have no problem with that. You know, I mean, that could be an agenda item for the board too.
I just want us, if we can just wait till after we move,
Yeah.
that would be really appreciated.
Yeah. Commissioner Caravano?
No comments.
Anything else? Great, and we don't have to approve this right now.
Yeah, I had another comment in regards to public health and safety. I had an agenda item, I believe on the April 1st agenda where the meeting was cut short,
What are the options?
basically proposing the inclusion of a framework for continued water quality monitoring efforts in the budget. So this is basically continued work with the RCD that, but their current contract has not been completed yet, and so the sample collection is still ongoing, and the final results will really be essential to look at before writing a new work plan or new contract. So with that in mind, I've discussed a proposed work plan with the RCD and developed a budget as a placeholder, so we don't have to later on amend the budget, because I think that's difficult too. If, you know, these things come up, get added on late, then we end up with a budget that's a lot further over than we anticipated. So on the April 1st agenda, I had this memo basically saying what the with the background information what the RCD has done already and what the focus could be for the next fiscal year. And one of the issues that just made this very apparent what the problem is the last weekend we had a triathlon that had its swim portion in the harbor, and I think 3 days before the triathlon took place, the water quality at the beach where the swim started and ended was really critical. It was actually, the beach was posted and as unsafe for contact with the water. And luckily the numbers went down and the event could happen without any risk to the athletes. But I think it's important that we keep looking at the issues, the water quality issues at the beach. It's also, because of the rain last Saturday, this week there were 4 beaches within the harbor that were posted, and salmon season is starting tomorrow for the commercial fishermen. So I think it would be helpful for everybody to address these water quality issues and do more research and try to get to where the bacteria originates from. And so that's why I had this proposal on the April 1st agenda, and I really would have liked to get it included in the preliminary budget. It was basically on the 3rd page of that proposal. It listed the tasks, a table with different tasks and the budget associated with different tasks. The proposed budget is $57,500. That draft proposal is not expected to increase significantly. It would come back in front of the board, before the board, for a decision once a contract with RCD can be finalized. And so I would like to get included for better planning purposes, but the board would still vote on the contract later on. So I don't know if this is an option that we can make a decision now to include this.
Well, Well, can I suggest, just because this document you have is also Debbie scanning it for the May 6th meeting, but like Sabrina said, when you adopt the preliminary budget, we have from May 6th to June 17th for, it's called Fix and Correct, so any new items that come up, so I'd be happy to add that for the final budget if you wanted to, if the board.
Well, it would have to be a board decision, I think. And
Can you just put it on the next page?
well, I know that is part of the problem, that the next, May 6th meeting and then the meeting we have in June is probably, they're probably both gonna be super cramped.
Well, aren't you calling a special meeting next week? Why don't you just put it on that agenda?
Because that agenda is coming out tomorrow, it will be posted tomorrow, so it's already out of my hands.
So I have a question. What are we currently paying the Resource Conservation District right now? Can we know? Don't we have a?
We have a PO, but the PO is for, I forget what was.
For the water quality testing.
Yeah, it was what, 28,000 or 50, 48,000 we had, or, I'd have to look it up, I don't know the number, but
When this comes back for consideration, could we get,
what we paid and all that, yeah.
yeah, so we know what we're already paying versus what additional funds
Sure.
are being requested?
Well, it's not additional, actually, if I remember correctly, it was about 20 to 30,000 on a regular basis, and then last year, they gave a presentation that was decided by the board to actually add onto it and do more, sample for more parameters. And so I think it ended up being more like 70 or 80,000 for the budget for them, but that was just last year. And this is the work they're wrapping up right now, and from the results of that work, we will be able to, ask more concise management questions and tailor the next approach for the coming year. But this proposed budget is a lot less, because I think we'll also learn which parameters we don't have to look at, because over the course of the last year, we didn't see hits or high alarming results. So this is definitely less than what we currently pay.
So I think that needs to be explained in its own agenda item, where we can look at what we've spent, like for the last couple of years versus what you're proposing to spend this year, and what's different about what we did last year versus what you are suggesting we do this year.
I can tell you that 48,000 is in the 14-15 budget for RCD.
How many?
48.
So it's
Okay.
practically already there.
I didn't know that.
So it's not a big change then. That's the kind of thing we just need to get clear on, Anything else? Okay, so the budget will be coming back for adoption at our next meeting, which is going to be on May 6th. And at that point, we're required by law, right, to adopt the preliminary budget.
Yes.
And then there'll still be further opportunities for people to
Yeah.
make changes potentially. Okay, so going forward, we're on item 3, discussion and possible action request for proposals for labor advisor negotiator report. Brindy attachments is a proposed RFP.
Yes, this is a report was asked of me to put in for this agenda item for labor negotiator for the upcoming team negotiations. And we have a report there.
And the report is just a
RFP draft.
RFP draft, which has a deadline. It says deadline for proposals Friday, June 5th. So if the board adopted or approved the RFP, when would it be posted?
Probably by Monday, just because timing.
Are there any questions?
You have speakerphones on this one.
Oh. Okay, we have Jim Merlot.
Hello, my name is Jim Merlot. I'm here speaking for some of my coworkers. The shop steward for Teamsters Group, David Doyle, was unable to attend today's special meeting and asked if I would be able to speak on his behalf. We would like to again share our thoughts on why we do not need an outside negotiator during these labor negotiations. At the last special meeting, the acting general manager stated that he had a good amount of experience dealing with a variety of unions on negotiations and labor contracts. It is our belief that he would be able to handle the negotiations if there were any concerns about the conflict of interest with the general manager performing the negotiations, because he received the same health benefits as the union members receive. I would like to point out that the contract for the general manager is entirely separate from that of the union contracts under negotiation. If a change is made to our pay or benefits, in the new MOU, the GM's pay or benefits do not change until the contract he is under comes up, and then the board decides if they want to make changes to his pay or benefits at that time. It does not matter who ends up doing the negotiations, as the board gives a negotiator direction to the changes they want made on the existing contract. The negotiator has to do their best work towards these goals set by the board. It is stated in both the MOUs that the general manager or a person he designates will be responsible for the negotiations. If the board does not want the acting general manager to handle the negotiations, then the negotiator should be someone that the acting general manager chooses to be in compliance with what is written in the MOU. Ultimately, the newly drafted MOU is brought back to the board for final approval after the negotiations are completed and before the contract gets put into place. As mentioned at the last meeting, it seems to us that it is an unnecessary expense for the district to spend money for a negotiator when we have a perfectly capable person at the district that can negotiate without the district spending money. It is money that can be put to better use by the district. If we were to get outside negotiator and negotiations were to drag out, it increases the chances of needing to augment the budget and spend even more money for the negotiator. Last, it was also mentioned during the last meeting that we should start the process for negotiations soon. If we were to take this to RFP, then we would have to wait for the proposals, get them organized, and bring them back to the board for selection. All of this would be done as we are trying to move the district main office. That would likely mean that we would not have a negotiator for the district until the end of May or even later, even 1 month or less behind when current contracts expire. We hope that given these considerations, you would choose to save the district time and money and not going out to RFP for the labor negotiator, and stick with the decision made at the last meeting, having the acting general manager, Scott Lindy, be the Harbor District's labor negotiator. Thank you.
Thank you. So next we have John Draper.
Good afternoon, John Draper. As Jim stated in the letter, our MOU states that bargaining units will negotiate with the general manager or his designee. If it is not the general manager and it is his designee, it goes back to the general manager. Also, in our personnel rules and regulation and the district ordinance codes state that the general manager or his designee will be doing the negotiations. In your RFP, it says that your outside guy is to report to the board, not to the general manager. That is a violation of all three of those. Just want to bring that up for you.
Thank you. And I just want to note that the RFP was reviewed by our council, is that correct?
I believe he was copied. I don't know if he ever gave a review comment.
My understanding was that he reviewed the RFP. So I would expect that staff would provide us with a legally correct RFP.
The RFP was given to me by the board, and I added the dates to it, and he was copied in all the emails.
Right, and he didn't object?
I did not hear any objections or comments.
Great. Do I hear any discussion?
Well, I think that Mr. Draper brings up some good points, and perhaps we need to have an outside negotiator get back to the manager. Right now, I'm in awe of thinking that Scott has the time to do this with the IT problems, with the move, with our search, and a lot of other things that are going on. And it just seems like he'd have more and better things to do to drive the goals of the district forward. I'm just wondering, I'd like to see everybody happy here, and I'm not sure how the negotiator brings a problem or a fly in the ointment here. I think we need a qualified consultant. Scott said he's done some negotiations. I believe it was a good point that Mr. Merlot made about you wouldn't get an increase in benefits right away. I just think we're kind of spread too thin. And I don't know, it's like, okay, we're going to tell the staff to drop what they're doing, and now we're going to get into negotiations when we'd have somebody else doing the negotiations. Right now, we're not spending money on a human resources manager. So it's not going to be an increased expense. Some of the things that that person would have undertaken would have been covered under this at the same time. I'd be interested in seeing the MOU or the RFP changed so that you were more happy to get an outside negotiator and yet have it brought back to the general manager. Wouldn't that be a similar?
The RFP does go to the general manager. That's what's included in the RFP.
Okay.
So I don't get that point.
All right.
It is going back to the GM as it should. Also,
yeah,
I'm a little confused because last time we had a meeting, the staff requested an RFP process. That came from staff. They specifically called out that they wanted an RFP process. So here we have an RFP, which provides an opportunity for anyone to put in a proposal. And now there's a problem with this process. This is the appropriate process. And I think it's completely understandable given how thin everybody's spread right now and the fact that we don't have an HR manager. And we have acting GM who potentially is going back to being harbor master soon. And we have potentially someone new coming on board who's going to need some time to get up to speed. I kind of feel like I'm just not comfortable with the pressure that I'm getting from the staff on this. I kind of feel like I'm being strong-armed or something, and I don't like it. I feel like we need to have, it's our turn to talk, and if you want to speak again, I'll call public comment again, but I feel like, you know, I need help from a advisor on labor, and we don't have that right now. I understand Scott has some experience, but not in the state of California, and the laws on labor in California are quite different than in other states. So I feel that it's in the best interest of the district to have an advisor for the board, and that's what we're really talking about here, is somebody to provide some advice to the board. It doesn't, the fact that we haven't done that before, well, clearly because we had an HR manager. You know, that was her job, and she worked with the representatives for labor. Sorry if I don't get all the terms right. And labor, our employees have representatives. They have representatives. We don't. That's a problem. We need to have our representative too as a district. And I'm just, you know, I'm no expert at this, and I feel like I need the advice of a professional, and that's why I think these proposals would be useful. If nothing else, just going through getting the proposals, I'm sure I will learn something just from reading the proposals about, you know, what kinds of services are out there. And, you know, we're not experts at this and we need help. And I think it totally makes sense to get some outside assistance, especially given the fact that we're short-staffed right now. So I would hope that our employees would understand that. I mean, we certainly understand the importance of their union representation and respect that. And I think to pressure the board not to have any representation that's specific to the district is not fair. You know, so I'm uncomfortable with this, and talking about labor issues is not something that I have experience doing, so I'm sorry if I'm not doing it right. I've never, you know, had to do this before, and we don't have any guidance coming in from staff. We haven't had a single meeting. We haven't had a closed session meeting about this. We have had one meeting, our last meeting, where we had someone who was an experienced labor advisor come in who could have potentially helped the district, who had a proposal. We heard loud and clear that the staff wanted an RFP. That was exactly what was asked for, and so that is what, the district has been responsive to staff's concerns by, finding an RFP that would work and having it run through our legal counsel to make sure it's appropriate and having it worded so that it's very clear that the proposals go directly to the general manager, not to a commissioner. I think that this is all very appropriate, and I'm see if someone else has comments. Yeah.
Clarification. Mike, it's a clarification. I don't know why you said you felt strong-armed. I never said anything about the outside negotiation. The only one I said, and it's in your proposal here, that the district reserves the right. Hold on, let me get the right one. Oh, the successful firm or individual will work directly for and at the directions of the San Mateo Harbor District Commission. That's what I stated. That's what's the violation.
Well, John, just to be clear, the board.
And we do have an HR person.
I have a temporary person I brought on just in the last week.
Well, you've never told us
I
that.
haven't announced it yet because it was going to announce it at the May 6th meeting and introduce it.
So we were completely uninformed about that. And as far as your point, I disagree. I disagree with your point completely. I think that the board ultimately makes the decisions for this district, and the general manager works for the board. So, when it comes to labor, these are board decisions, not general manager decisions. The board has to approve the MOU, not the general manager, and that's the way it's always been. So I don't know how you're trying to spin this here, but I'm disagreeing with you. And I think it's got to be really clear that it's a board decision, not a general manager decision, not an HR manager decision, not an HR assistant decision. It's a board decision. Yes.
I wanted to just share my thoughts on that. I can understand the possible perception of the public that there might be a conflict of interest when the general manager negotiates with the unions, because at some point he or she might get eligible for the same benefits. I can understand that, even though the county does it the same way. There are a lot of agencies that do it that way still. I also see the flip side of that, the benefit that where I think the general manager actually has some ownership of the strategy of the district, and especially the financial strategy, and should have the best interest of the district at heart and help the district thrive, and might with that actually be a better negotiator than a contractor with no ties directly to the district. So I can see both sides. I have asked a lot of people a lot of questions about this issue. I have learned that the labor laws are different in California than they are in Washington. I totally trust Scott that he could get up to speed if he would have the time to commit to that. But the labor laws in California, I've heard, are actually kind of funny to deal with sometimes, and we are in the transition from a an acting general manager to an interim general manager to hopefully a permanent general manager, all, that could all happen within the process of the labor negotiation. So I'm a little worried, and it might work better to have, for this negotiation, to have a contractor assigned to that for this year. When I read the RFP, I have concerns about a little bit of too much board involvement that could potentially drag out the negotiation process and increase the cost too. For example, in section number 3 on page 2, at the very last sentence says, prior to each labor negotiation, the district shall approve the contractor's personnel assigned to a particular labor negotiation. I think that is way more than I want to take on. Like, if we hire a contractor, I think we should trust them, we should have vetted the references, and we should trust them that they signed trusted staff to do the work, and we don't need to go through another approval process of any staff they assign to the negotiation. So I would definitely like to have that sentence take out. And I would also like to double check with our legal counsel that this RFP is not violating the MOU in regard to what Mr. Baker said.
So that sentence that you pointed out, that's just some, I don't know where this language came from, but it's some boilerplate language that can be amended.
We could take it out.
That's not a big deal. That could easily be taken out. So I'd like to propose that we.
There's still public comment.
We already did public comment.
I have my name in there.
Okay, go
I
ahead.
also submitted.
And so did Carol. Having been with the district almost 10 years, I was the Teamster representative for staff for quite some time. And also doing the payroll, I know the MOUs inside and out, front and back. I have them memorized. John is spot on. And what it says in the MOU is the general manager or his designee negotiates. And then the general manager gets information from this designee and he goes to the board. It doesn't say that we hire an outside consultant. My concern is, it was asked, did the lawyer look at this? It's kind of like, oh, I don't know, well, I think he did, well, he might have, well, he must have. Do we know?
Yes, we know he looked at it.
And so this is not in violation of the MOU?
That's right, he looked at this before we put it in the packet, yes.
Okay, because the last thing I have is in, the only one being strong-armed in this is Scott. Staff has asked, what's going on? What's going on? He's like, I just, there's nothing I can do, I'm beat up, I'm done, and I just want to point out that that's the only one being strong-armed.
Harry?
Thank you for taking the time today. I'm the alternate union rep for Pillar Point Harbor, and I'm embarrassed by the comment of strong arm. I feel that it's our lives that we're talking about here, and since I've been here 15 years, we've never had an MOU that has been negotiated on time. Our last one we were almost 2 years into before we signed it. So the rush to get an outside firm to come in and negotiate, I find quite curious. I'm sorry for your feelings, Sabrina. I found out about this yesterday at 3 o'clock. And I had to work today, so I couldn't be here in person, but I'm able to be here in person only because I'm the alternate shop steward. There are a lot of our staff that aren't able to be here. And we are really thin. And we're the face. And we're out there dealing with the public every day, cleaning bathrooms to saving lives. And this is important to us. This is about my family's future, and this is about the future of all our families. And this is a serious matter, and we think it should be handled appropriately. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, I appreciate that. And I'd just like to follow up by saying I have checked with a number of other special districts and cities, and they have labor advisors. They have negotiators. So it's not, I feel like what's being portrayed here is that something unusual is happening. This is not unusual. In fact, this district has had labor advisors in the past. I mean, that's the way the district used to function. So there was an outside consulting firm that handled labor negotiations in the past for this district. It's the case with most special districts, city councils. This thing typically gets outsourced. So I'm not understanding why this is such a strange topic for people. I think this is the way it's typically done and the way that our district has been doing it. It falls outside of what the norms generally are. And I want to point that out. And, you know, I understand change is scary, you know, and people don't like change. But this district needs to run in a more professional manner, and the board needs assistance to make that happen. So that's where I'm coming from right now, and we don't have the assistance that we need. You know, we're short-staffed. That's all I can say. I think we need to consider outsourcing this, and Tom, would you like to say anything else?
I hate the idea of delaying this. I'd like to see Scott devote his duties to the myriad of things on his plate now. I'm trying to figure out how taking out that sentence would be beneficial to us or not. And the other thing I'd like to potentially have our district attorney look at is the MOU. So I would propose evaluating whether that sentence is important or not. And I'm conflicted here. I'd like an independent negotiator, but I want to do this in a way that brings the least amount of grief to the people that are affected by this bargaining agreement. Is that sentence important? I'm not a lawyer, I don't know.
The sentence is clearly not important. I mean, that doesn't take a lawyer to tell you that. As far as, when we could bring this back to a future meeting, if you want to have Stephen Miller here, he should have been here, so I'm not sure why he didn't come today. But, you know, he has reviewed this proposal or this RFP. As it stands, if the board wanted to take out that sentence, we could strike the sentence right now, and we could move forward with approving this RFP as it is, so that we don't have to keep going over the same item over and over again, which I'd like to avoid, so we could keep moving the district forward. And we could approve it on the condition that Stephen Miller gives it the final polishing.
Blessing, not in violation.
So he did read the MOUs too, Scott? when you gave
Of
him
course
that?
he's read the MOUs.
Well, Scott he didn't answer that, yes, I mean, he's kind of shaking his head, I don't.
All I know is that Steve was copied on all the
But you never got a response
Never got any
back.
comments or response back.
Let's double check to be on the safe side. And can I ask a clarifying question? So since this is my first time being involved in this too, is it correct that the board would sit down with the negotiator and give them direction, bullet points of what we're concerned about, bullet points of what we want to achieve, that it's for the board that it's important, and that we understand that staff is trying to make a living in a very expensive area in California, and are we giving this basically what's important to us, are we communicating that to the negotiator as a board?
The negotiations with whether the general manager is the person designated as a negotiator or an outside, labor advisor is designated as a negotiator, the negotiations happen in closed session. So it's not an open session discussion. It's a closed session, just like the labor has discussions with their representatives without involving us. They have private discussions with their representatives where they work on their points of concern, what's important to them, and then their negotiators come to our district and meet with our negotiator, and they hammer out something that hopefully everybody's very happy with. That's the idea, you know, is to come up with a solution that works for labor and works for the district. And so it's having someone who is meeting with the labor negotiator designated. And so the board can, I hope I'm helping. I mean, I don't know if
Well,
I am.
I'm just wondering if we sit down with the negotiator and basically say like, okay, we have to be careful about the excise tax, we have to, but we can give a little here and take a little there. Do we give that message to the negotiator and give them direction?
In closed session, the board can communicate with the negotiator however they want. I mean, within a limit of what the Brown Act allows, but that's the opportunity. So it's not something, I don't really want to talk about what we would talk about in closed
No, I
session.
understand.
But yes, that's what the closed session discussion is about. You can set some parameters. You could decide, we're just gonna let you handle it, come back to us with what you would recommend, you know, any number of different scenarios can unfold.
So maybe for Commissioner David, in the way the negotiations develop is that we direct the negotiator on the terms. And then that negotiator works with the negotiator from the unions on their terms. And then that's the whole process of negotiation. So there are two people that our feelings and thoughts both, or I'm sorry, there's one person that our thoughts and desires go through. The unions have the same process. So then there's a meeting of the minds, and then there's, it's like any other negotiation. You work until everybody's satisfied. So, and that has happened in the past with the general manager acting as the negotiator for the Harbor District. And that's why I feel to see why the board president says that this is, that people think that this is strange, and that we have to act more professional. Well, we have acted very professionally. When we go through negotiations with the unions, it always has been with the general manager, working with the unions. And it's not been, the reason why it's strange now, you're hearing this in public comment, because there's a change. There's a different way of doing things that it's new territory. And regardless if we have an HR person or not, we have done negotiations with the unions without an HR person. So I think we have to take the comments that we've heard today very seriously in terms of that if there are changes to the way the contracts get negotiated with the unions, that it has kind of like we are investing less in our employees. Right now we invest 100% into our employees in terms of trust, in terms of dedication, in terms of loyalty. But when we feel like we have to go circumvent the normal professional process that this district has had for decades, I think it sends a different message to everybody that's involved. And being a very small district with, I believe there's approximately about 25 employees in both unions, that's not a very large union group. When we're talking, if we're talking about other districts and other organizations, the unions are a lot larger. There's a lot more demand. There's a lot more needs and other factors that go into negotiations. But we've been able to handle this in-house, and I think the comments that we've heard today about the financial commitment that would be involved in this is a drain. It would be a severe drain on us, and it's just like we're opening up our pockets for things that we can handle ourselves. And I would like to ask Mr. Grindy, in your open for a clarification, this RFP, where did you say that this came from?
I received by email from 2 board members, or 1 board member, and it was copied to the attorney and the other board member.
So this did not even come from staff?
And what I
No.
changed, what I modified
Oh
on
my
the
gosh.
item was the dates and the addresses and such.
And I'd like to say that the reason that it didn't come from staff, and it didn't come from me either, is because staff refused to produce an RFP. Staff was asked to produce an RFP, and our acting general manager said that he was not capable of producing the RFP, and that he wanted the attorney to do it. The attorney then said that he didn't believe that it was his responsibility to do it. He didn't want to burden the district with the $345 an hour he charges to write an RFP, and that he believed that it was at the acting general manager's responsibility to draft the RFP. This is all really embarrassing.
This is embarrassing.
And, yeah, it is. And so then, out of helpfulness, Commissioner Mateusz produced a draft RFP and submitted it to Scott and CC'd Stephen Miller, our attorney, on it. So that is why a commissioner had to do the work of staff, which is really unfortunate, and that shouldn't happen. You know, if staff, if there's an RFP that needs to be produced, then it should come from staff, I agree. But if staff refuses or says they're not capable to produce it, then what is one to do? So this is the problem, this is the problem. And I want to point out, I think Carrie Smith made a really good point, that this district has been late in dealing with its union negotiations for a number of years. We have a track record of not being on time and being unresponsive, and the letters that are attached to this board packet item show that, we've received these letters to start the discussions, and so far we haven't, we've given some cursory response similar to the response we just gave to the civil grand jury, but we haven't started the reopener discussions yet as they requested. And in addition to that, the unions have put in, at least one of them, maybe 2, have put in a request for back funds that they say that the district owes. They say we owe them money for a number of years, and we're delinquent in paying the money that we owe the unions.
I'm sorry, what are you talking about?
There's a letter that I received from Marietta Harris, which states that we owe money.
I got it waived.
Okay, well, that was never discussed with the board.
I'm just letting you know. When I hear money, I talked to the union that billed us that back for 3 years and said that I was present at every union negotiation, that I was there for every audit, and if at any time during those 3 years, they had never once said that the district owed more money, where is this coming from? And I said that if this money was due during, if we knew there was going to be increases in benefits, we wouldn't have offered raises. So we can't pay raises and pay you, so he's waiving it.
So
and I'm gonna
when did that discussion?
I was on the phone with him, I don't know, sometime this week, and I asked him to draft me a letter just so that
So
they
you don't have a
can't
letter
come
yet?
back. No.
Okay.
Once I get a letter, I'll let you know.
Yeah, and I appreciate you looking into that.
Yeah, because it was kind of sitting there, and I just thought,
That was from last year.
no.
My understanding was their
No, the letter didn't come from last year. It's 3 years back payment, but the letter came within the last 6 months. It's not sitting on someone's desk for a year.
well, 6 months ago was last year.
Oh.
So that's what I meant, last year. We got it in we got it last year.
And so he took it out of collections, and he put a, stop, don't ask them to be billed anymore. And I sent him a letter saying, or I sent him an email and said, can you confirm that you're waiving this fee in writing so that, 2 years down the road, it doesn't come up again.
And I would like to see things be more organized. So
Okay,
I think
let me get back
that's
to-
my
Hang
point.
on, let me explain since I've been brought into this. The last meeting, Scott had indicated he had done union negotiations before. Said, hey, Scott, write us an RFP. He says, I don't know how to do that. Have somebody else do it. This came from the internet, and it's basically the exact agreement changed with locale that the city of Monterey used for their police, fire, sheriffs, about 5 different agencies. So the only thing that was changed is the positions, the names of the unions, and a description of the location. So this is on the internet publicly. Where I got it was just looking at Monterey. So the city of Monterey used this exact agreement to request for a negotiator, just to clarify things and put it out there.
And because so many cities and special districts put out RFPs for labor advisors and negotiators, the internet is full of them. So it's not hard. All you have to do is Google and you'll find several. I mean, it's right there. So I'm not sure why our staff couldn't help us with this, but because they weren't able to, and I do get how busy everybody is. Commissioner Mateusz was trying to be helpful, and we've had things like that come up before where a commissioner is trying to be helpful and trying to fill in where staff isn't able to because we are stretched thin, and then that commissioner is attacked for trying to help out the district. And I don't like that kind of attack on board members who have the district's best interests at heart. I think it really doesn't move the ball forward. I think it's regressive, and we really need to keep our business moving forward and and discontinue rehashing these issues over and over again. In my mind, it's clear that we need some assistance with this. It sounds to me like what I'm hearing is that we want to have council here and bring this item back. Is that?
Well, didn't you ask for an RFP at the last meeting?
Nope.
It's on video, John.
What was stated, if I may, what was stated is what we didn't feel that the process was followed correctly. We thought that there was one negotiator that was going to be assigned the negotiations. And to reiterate, we understand about negotiations. That's what they are. They're negotiations. So whoever you pick to choose to do the negotiation is going to do your wishes. You know, this is what I said before. So you guys will have an agenda, which you will relay to your negotiator, whoever that may be, and they'll come to our negotiator, and we have an agenda, and they hash it out. We understand it. We just want to make sure that the process is followed correctly.
Why are you so fearful of the district hiring a labor consultant?
I'm not fearful of it
Okay.
at all.
No.
What I'm concerned about is the statements in our MOU that the process isn't being followed correctly. There's a sentence in the proposal, in the RFP, that says the negotiator, that the proposed negotiator, so the outside negotiator, has to report directly to the commission. And that's not what our MOU reads or our policies read. It says that the negotiator is to report to the general manager, and then the general manager is to report to the...
I just wanted to make sure, because I had heard at that one meeting, an RFP, don't pick him, do the RFP.
Well,
so we did the RFP.
Yeah, the RFP is to follow the
But
correct
wouldn't we
procedure.
be approving a new MOU, so we could change that?
No, absolutely, but as of right now, that's what it states. So if we're doing this in transparency, we want to follow the correct procedures.
Solve the problem. Have the advisor report to Scott and solve the problem.
Scott still has to bring it
Yeah.
forward.
Scott reports to the board anyway, so.
We're not fearful of the
Report to
negotiations,
Scott.
pushed out from the negotiations. Just the way this whole thing is going throughout this coastal community on attacks on different avenues. We're not attacking, we're concerned for our future. When I mentioned that we have had delays on our contracts, we've been in our old contract, and we worked through our old contract until the negotiations came through that were mutually acceptable to both sides. So being under a contract doesn't mean it ends on a specific date. You're under that contract until the new contract is
We
signed.
know that. We will
So I just don't understand the speed of this and the special meeting for this and the importance of this being done right this second when you guys have said today, staff is spread thin, there's so many projects on the books. We're trying to do the best we can, and that's one more thing we have to worry about. And the speed is one of the things that I think could be perceived as something going on behind closed doors.
Nothing's going on behind closed doors. We have not had a closed session meeting on this topic at all. And, as far as getting the district getting input from a labor advisor, it seems to me that that's in the best interest of the district, and it could very well be in the best interest of the employees too. And we are not, we as board members, you know, need to get sound advice from people who are experts on the topic, just like as labor, you guys need to get sound advice from the people who work for you, who negotiate on your behalf. You know, you need those people to represent you well. This district hasn't had representation. I know, because I've been in the closed session meetings, I know what's happened. And I can tell you that they're, all right, I'm not gonna comment on it any further. We need to have this come back through council. I mean, that's sort of where I'm at with it, unless you want to move forward with some sort of amendment.
I think we've already discussed an amendment that we try and council, and we need to look at the MOU. I was trying to bring back an RFP because he asked for an RFP. And then when the general manager couldn't do it, somebody went out and did
The
it.
problem's not with the RFP, as I stated. It's with that one sentence in the violation of the MOU. And policies and procedures and personnel regulations.
So we need just 2 sentences changed.
So which sentences, and I want to circle it.
One sentence and 1 word. Is that it?
It's,
We're in page 2, top sentence.
Paragraph 3, I think.
I can't see anyone.
Okay, so I'm fine with having our council review that sentence and also the sentence that Commissioner David would like to have amended. Deleted.
If we just change those 2, you'd go for this procedure right now.
Don't understand it, but we could go for it.
Well, it should say that a successful firm or individual will work directly and for the direction of the San Mateo County Harbor Commission through the general manager.
Yeah.
So if you just added through the general manager, that solves the problem. So basically what it is, that negotiator goes to the general manager brings that to you.
So let me get this right. Contractor will work directly with the commission through the GM as its primary contact as needed on the following 1 through 8.
That's correct, because then that way the general manager has designated him as a negotiator, whoever you choose.
You're still spending the money. That can go towards
We're
the
not
system.
spending any money right now
No,
except
but
to
you
put
will.
out an RFP.
Yeah.
There's no money happening here.
Right now.
That's correct.
Right.
Correct.
So this is not a final
Understand.
deal here. This is just putting out an RFP. That's all we're talking about. So I'm fine with making those 2 changes, and so I move that we approve this RFP with those 2 changes, which I'll restate. Are you taking the minutes? Okay. So we would update page 2, contractor will work directly with the commission through the general manager as its primary contact as needed on the following. And then on, where is it?
Same page.
Same page, we will delete prior to each labor negotiation, the district shall approve the contractor's proposal assigned to a particular labor negotiation. Delete that sentence. It's just an RFP. I mean, my gosh. Did you get that, Emily? Yeah. Okay, great. So, would anybody like to make a motion? Didn't you just make that? Oh, second.
Second.
I have one minor thing on page 3. I don't think we need an amended motion for that, but on page 3, under demonstrated success, it says, does the proposer demonstrate that it has, the proposer should not be referred to as it, and it should just read that they have, but that's just a minor thing.
I agree. So, did you catch that? Want me to restate it? You got it? Okay. So, on page 3, it's item 1, and where it says, does the proposer demonstrate that it has, Commissioner David is suggesting that it say, demonstrate that they have the appropriate experience. So I'm going to restate the motion and then call for another second, just to be extra clear on all the changes, because we don't want any misunderstandings here. So on page 2, we're going to amend the first sentence to say, contractor will work directly with the commission through the general manager as its primary contact as needed on the following. Then further down on page 2, we're going to delete at the bottom of the paragraph, prior to each labor negotiation, the district shall approve the contractor's personnel assigned to a particular labor negotiation. We're deleting that. And then on page 1, we are amending item 1 to say, does the proposer demonstrate that they have the appropriate experience and expertise in conducting successful labor negotiations similar to those likely to be performed for the district? It's a question.
That was page 3, item 1.
Yeah, page 3, item 1. So I withdraw my past motion. I restate that what I just restated is my current motion. Can I get a second?
Second.
Can we get a roll call?
We have discussion.
Okay.
I'd like to ask the president, at our last meeting when we talked about this, about the topic of labor negotiation, was there a decision made after that agenda item?
No, there wasn't.
There wasn't.
No.
So how did this specific item of issuing request for proposal for labor advisor negotiator appear on this agenda?
This is a special meeting, and the board president can place items on the agenda. That's our policy.
So, but it says that that Grindy is the one that's making the report. So this should be coming from you.
Grindy did give the report. He provided this RFP in your
What we heard was
packet.
a little different. That this RFP was sent to him.
Do you have anything productive to say?
That was sent to him by 2 members of the commission. By one member of the commission. Even under special meetings, the president can put on agenda items as he or she wishes. But in terms of supporting documents, did the president ask the staff for an RFP?
Commissioner Carolano, I just want to remind you that we adopted board norms, and we need to work together as a cooperative group here. And I feel like what you're doing is really regressive, and it's actually destructive and counterproductive to moving forward with the work of the district. So I would just like to remind you of that. I really don't want to continue to have these conversations. It's just not useful.
I think there's some obvious ways that this has appeared on this agenda that are
Well,
not.
we fully discussed it, so there's
And I hope you understand it.
We fully discussed it.
I hope you understand that.
Thank you for that. Anything else?
I had proposed a much shorter timeline, that with the move and some other things, it's been pushed out further than I would have liked. When I saw the request by the union, I had proposed a much shorter timeline, trying to comply with the requests in the letters, not realizing how this may or may not have been that important.
Okay, so thank you, everybody. Can we get a roll call?
Commissioner Bernardo, Commissioner David, Commissioner Mateusz,
Aye.
Commissioner Carolino,
No.
President Brennan.
Aye, thank you. All right, that was a long one. Thank you, everybody, for showing up, and I just want to say that I really appreciate the comments, and I know this is a very personal, deeply personal issue for you guys, and I know that I can speak for myself here, want to work constructively with our staff, so just want to assure you of that. And I don't know if you plan to hang out for the whole meeting, but I do appreciate you coming. So next we've got item 4, which is progress update on hiring replacement IT consultant for various tasks, including urgent needs such as administrative office move. And it should be noted that this is simply a progress update. That's all, because we have a move in front of us, and I know at least one of our staff members, Deborah Galarza, wants to be sure that she's going to be able to log on. So if Scott could please give us an update.
Gladly. In June, after the move has occurred, I hope to bring back first off, I just got some notes here, so bear with me here. After the move and it calms down a little bit, I hope to bring back in the June meeting an RFP for an IT service provider. Right now, I'm more concerned with being an IT mover, so we get things moved. There is a contract called CMAS, which I'm bad on the acronym, but it's California, and it's I have the copy in the back here, but basically that is a state contract, and I will go to private companies as well as CMAS. It's a contract that the state of California accepts and uses for all small special districts, cities, you name it, where you can go through and buy parts. You can provide, they provide services, you name it. It's an IT blanket for the whole state.
What are they called again? I'm sorry.
CMAS, let me give you the
CMAS,
website. I'll give you the website if you just bear with me for a minute. It's under the procurement division of the multiple award schedules. What it's called is the California Multiple Award Schedule, CMAS. And the website, and I have on the sheet here, I thought I did. I'm sorry, I thought I did have it highlighted, but I don't.
We can go.
Yeah, it's a CMAS, it's an abbreviated term for use, but what this does, just to read through it real quickly, it says, Multiple Award Schedules offers a wide variety of commodities, non-IT services, informational technology products, and services at prices which have been assessed to be fair, reasonable, competitive. Suppliers may apply, and it goes on to that part. And it's a state thing. It's very much like if you go buy a state, go to a bid list for a truck, or you can buy just about anything off it. And all the companies, there's probably about roughly 75 to 100 companies in the state that are on the list. And at least it gives us a resource when we go out for the RFP. We can make sure we contact all because they provide all their email addresses. So we can send that out also to, put it in the local papers and a few things like that. Back to the update.
So that, and you said that would be, you think, sometime in June, perhaps?
I'm hoping.
Okay.
I want to make sure I got through the move so we know everything's working before we go to the panic mode on that one. Comcast is now in the space, so we've gotten that line taken care of. I think it was last Thursday or Friday. So that we have the cable connection so that when we do move over, we're ready to go. We're still working on some phone issues there for numbers and transferring of numbers. So it's hard to update you on that one. I don't have an update yet. In the past, and I should say also, passwords have been changed for our various devices for firewalls and such too. And we had to change some accounts like the, no, I'm thinking the river, Apple, sorry. Yeah, that's on our name now, not our vendor's name. And try to transfer everything we could for that type of thing. And as you recall at our last meeting, we had two different we had one company that actually provided us a quote proposal for about $6,500, and yet what the direction I got from the board was to see if I could go out and find a governmental firm that could provide the same service, or a city or somebody. I've done a lot of phoning. I appreciate the help from one of the commissioners, Commissioner David. She had contacted a few folks and they gave me the numbers, so at least I can find out what other cities, because there's a lot of cities around here, small ones. What I learned is that there's only about 3 cities in the area that provide services not only to their own city, but also to other small municipalities or special districts. South City was one and Redwood City was the other that I had the best luck with. And Redwood City actually came out and brought along a firm called EPC IT Solutions. And unfortunately, how life goes, I just got the proposal today at about 1 o'clock before I got here. So I'm still reviewing it, but it works out. The limit I was given by the board was $10,000. And their proposal includes the computer for a finance workstation at Pillar Point Harbor so that we can keep our finance running while we're down. And so their number included that. And the reason they gave me that number also was because we had one machine that may be a spare, but it used to be the HR person's older computer. And we could probably use it. Unfortunately, we also have to make sure that they take everything out, and we don't know if it works. It's been sitting on the floor for maybe 2 years. So I'm trying to pick worst case scenarios here versus best case scenario cost. So what I'm going to be asking the board today is to ask for a few dollars more if I go with this governmental EPC company. If I go to Caspian, which does have a really good price and appropriately about the same services, they were going to reuse one of our computers, so their price did not reflect the other equipment that CMAS did the review on. They had a couple items, including a server that, or not a server, I'm sorry. I'm not an IT person when it comes to that, so I'm trying to make sure I get the wording right here. But they also included a price for what's called a Barracuda firewall. They only needed one, but it was $899 plus some service agreements to go with it, the maintenance service, which came to a total before tax of $1,200. And that wasn't brought up in Caspian, so I don't know. That's why I'd ask for $10,000 if I was going with Caspian, because we may find things we need to do, or something.
What was the total for the new estimate?
The new estimate totals out about $10,744. So it's about $700 over the that the board gave me the other day.
And the Caspian estimate was for $5,000?
$6,500, and I'd asked them not to exceed $10,000 because I just know that we're not getting everything.
Can you ask for an apples to apples comparison? So
that's what they have done. And the problem is that everybody writes their proposals different. I tried to do that when we met the last meeting, and I explained that what I put out for a proposal of what I need for the boxes to be filled is not how it comes back. Because they're wording what they're doing, what they're proposing, and it's hard to do apples and apples. But we're right around the $10,000 figure. And I haven't had time yet, as I noted, to review the CMAS. I'm comfortable with either firm. It's more just, I'm also trying to stay with a state contract provider by the direction of the board last meeting, or some kind of a version of a municipal type provider. So, I'm trying to ask for some direction here so that I'm not going against board direction.
Well, because this is a discussion item only.
Right.
We could give you some verbal direction, but we can't change what we voted on
Right, I know.
last time.
Can I just weigh in, because my paranoia of having a workstation, I remembered years back that the old IT person installed our financial software on a system. So I went to Pillar Point for a while and I found that system, and I was able to generate reports, and the only thing I did is I called Office Depot and I bought a $200 printer, and so that way I can, I'd have to kick someone off their workstation, but I just want to say if everything else dies, I think I can cut checks at Pillar Point.
Okay, so you feel like you have that covered?
I want to test it, but I'm just saying it looks pretty good.
Okay.
Yeah, and that may give us a cost reduction.
That's why I'm
under the
saying that-
10,000. I just haven't had time to talk with him because I was driving when they sent it.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, it seems to me that we are under a really tight turnaround here, and I'm concerned about, the fact that we're still looking at proposals and we're not actually doing anything yet. So that worries me, and I'm sure it worries you guys too. And I really, really feel strongly that, some of the problems that happened with our last IT provider were related to, all right, let me back up. I don't want to say that. What I want to say is we need to work with vendors who give us a lot of bang for our buck, and we want a good deal. So if one vendor is providing the same service as another, and one is almost $1,000 more than what we said we wanted to spend, and the other vendor was around $6,000, and the new vendor is now $10,800, why would we want to spend $10,800?
That's why I'm just giving you the information,
Okay.
because I haven't had time to, as I said, go through it, talk with Deborah as her comment here, or anybody, because I was driving when I got to see the report.
Okay,
And, I talked to both vendors, asking them for our approximate dates of move, because we're still trying to get that figured out, because the movers are all backing out on us right now, because it's the moving season. And so where I'm at is that I know we're gonna have higher costs in the move even, but it probably won't be a lot, but it will be more. And I don't have a problem with either one of these firms, so if I go lower, I'm fine, but I wanna make sure I'm talking with my staff before I do that.
well, you have the authority
Okay,
based on
yeah.
our last,
Yeah, this is just an update.
okay.
So, trying to think if there's anything else to tell you. And both firms have verified that they're okay with the dates for moving. So,
Well, that's good.
yeah, I mean, that's kind of, that was a bigger piece of it for me.
Yeah, that's huge.
Yeah, that's huge. And so that's probably the short version of a long couple weeks here.
Okay, well, I hope something pans out quick, so we can get it done. At least we can have the IT done. I don't know about the rest of the move.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah. Any other questions? Okay, let's move on to, item 5, discussion of possible action, Finance Committee update, report Brennan Matoush, approved committee responsibilities and membership application. So in the board packet, this is item 5. We'll go to item 5. We've got a report from the Finance Committee's, well, we have a couple things. In the back, we have a report from the Finance Committee's March 4th, no, wait a minute. This is out of order. Oh, I see. Meeting report, meeting date, March 26th. So this is from our first Finance Committee meeting, so if you're interested, you can look through the meeting report and get a sense of the types of things that were discussed. We had a very good turnout for the meeting. The meeting was held here in the same room, and we have a very knowledgeable and inquisitive group of public members who've been showing up for these meetings, which has been really helpful. And so it's all kind of laid out here, and you can see the questions for staff, which we had included many of them in our, well, I think all of them, right, in the board
Well, I want to
packet.
say that I think a lot of item 5 is answered in item 2.
What does that mean?
Well, you have these questions, this is item 5, right?
Yeah, you've already done this.
No, I'm just saying, if people were looking at the questions and wanted the answers, they
right.
could go to item 2.
So item 2 in your board packet is where staff is getting back to
There you go.
the committee, thank you, regarding the March 26th questions that came out of that Finance Committee meeting. So I hope that helps the board understand where that information, where it came from, or where the questions came from. And then we also have attached a application from Bud Ratz, which he's the first person who has been interested in being a member of the committee. So we have that in front of us, and then we have a list of committee responsibilities. We went over this at our last, second to last Finance Committee meeting, which was held on April 23rd. And by the way, Martha from LAFCO was at the meeting. She's been at our last 2 Finance Committee meetings, and she's had some helpful input. And the committee members, Commissioner Matoush and myself, went over this list of committee responsibilities with the public members and with Martha, the people that were at the meeting. And it had been edited at a previous meeting, and this was sort of the outcome of those edits. And it was unanimously supported by everyone at the meeting. Obviously, Tom and I we're not voting on things at these meetings because these are just advisory meetings, but I just wanted to report back to the board that there was unanimous support by the public and by the board members for moving forward with this list of responsibilities for the committee. And so it's the hope of the committee members that we approve tonight this list of committee responsibilities. And then also approve the application of Bud Rats to be on the committee, and that's pretty much it. So, Tom, do you want to, do we have any questions? Yes.
Just a quick one for actually Tom, and being Robert's not here, just want our strategic plan, trying to catch up with that one too. Was there an approximate date? Because we were talking, I saw a couple different emails coming out of the committees.
I just saw the one that was posted today, and I had like about 5 or 6 small edits.
Okay.
I've called around to try and, in fact, it's too bad Jimmy Anderson left.
Oh, yeah.
I had a question that said the charter boat business started in 1954. For some reason, in the back of my mind, I thought it was the Miss Princeton was built in 1949. I'm not sure. There's some other small things that I was going to put in a memo to you, and that's for that. I've also been in touch with some West Coast NOAA folks who are in very respectable offices, and the East Coast, and we're just trying to get a statement to make sure that the contractor understands the importance of some amendments and some information that I've sent him to provide him with the community sustainability plan, and we'll have people from the federal government writing a letter rather than me asking them to do something.
Thank you. I know that I would like at your next meeting with Robert and yourself, maybe even if we can get just you and Robert and Deborah and I together at some point to kind of strategize, hopefully after the move, but the intent behind it. I really think that we need to circle the wagons through, a lot of history is kind of fading away, and I want to make sure we bring it all back what we need.
Well, it should come back in the strategic business plan. When you
Right.
look at the plans that they provided for Monterey, I think that we had people from the Mid-Coast Community Council said, let's not just pay for another study
Right.
and not implement it. And the one thing I didn't see out of the previous plans was a strong direction, and I haven't seen anything that says by year 5 this will have been completed, by year 10 this will have been completed. We don't have anything concrete to perform that I've seen so far.
Right.
We've got a little.
I just want to make sure we're not getting behind too far so that we lose the memory cells, shall we say, for this item. So that we're all on the same page.
And can I comment on the finance piece of the strategic plan? So I think in our yesterday, our meeting, you had said, we're not, you didn't know what was going on with the strategic plan. And, so there was an item on March 8th and then an email that followed that just kind of said where we were at, and nothing's changed. We're still working with the consultant. Unfortunately, my accountant's been sick all week, and then we had just meeting after meeting, so I basically didn't call him back because I just didn't have the time. But we're really at the final edit, so, I'm hoping we can get that out before we move.
I have a couple of small comments that would be applicable to your department as well.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
No, I don't have them now.
Oh, okay.
I've got them down on a piece of paper. I'll give it to Scott.
Okay.
And then we can all discuss it. I just want to make sure that they didn't leave some blatant things out. When they talked about how beautiful some of the other harbors were, I think it's very important to talk about how the tsunami devastated Santa Cruz. Santa Cruz was able to totally rebuild on somebody else's dime, and now they're looking really good.
Yep.
But they chose not to put that in their report.
And you know what? I told them to, so I want to see if they included that in the edit, because that's what... Well, you haven't seen the draft after the draft. You've kind of, I think...
I saw the draft that we got this morning.
Oh.
I sent them saying I think they sent to you, but you probably haven't seen it yet.
I haven't opened it. Oh, so they didn't include it, because I told them that that was a key
There's just
part.
some little things like that.
Yeah.
Can we get back to the agenda?
Yeah, sorry.
So just to finish that sort of side conversation there, which we didn't agendize, so we shouldn't be discussing, but maybe it would be helpful if that draft could be sent to the full board so that we're all on the same page.
I think after our final edits from finance, it should be sent to the board.
And then it's a draft to the board.
Then it's a draft to the board.
Okay, that would be great, and then we can give our feedback at that point, and then we
Yeah.
can agendize it.
Right.
Okay, so back to item 5, which is about the finance committee. I would like to hear if there's a motion to approve the finance committee
I
responsibilities.
have some comments on that.
Okay,
So in regards to the second part of this item, I have no problem appointing Bud Rez as a member of the committee. I do have concerns about the responsibilities of the finance committee. When I read under the second bullet point for reporting, there are 3 bullets: work with staff to develop useful and readable report formats, work with staff to develop a list of desired reports, and work with staff to understand the implications of the reports. The last one almost sounds somewhat insulting in my mind. And I also see a problem with the committee working with staff, because that's really not, the committees were established as advisory committees and should advise the board and give recommendations to the board and not to staff. I think it's important that directions to staff through the general manager come from the board as a single message and not as an individual message or a message from 1 or 2 commissioners, because that could be perceived as a unilateral direction of public resources with the staff and at this point being considered the public resource. And I think that's problematic. I think the idea of developing a useful report format and developing a list of desired reports, those are good things that the finance committee can take on. I think it would be better to then bring these ideas to the board for approval, and then that can be basically relayed through the general manager to staff, so they can work with the updated report format or an updated report list. But I think it could cause some problems if the committee worked directly with staff, or even the auditor, which it says in the next.
Would it help if we just put work with general manager to direct staff or advise staff?
Well, that's why my point, the single message from the board.
Let's back up a second, because what you don't know is that we were instructed by Martha of LAFCO to involve staff and to work with staff at our meetings. And in fact, she called our last finance committee meeting, and she called it specifically so that staff would be there at the meeting to work with the finance committee. So we're getting this input from LAFCO, and I take that very seriously. And the finance committee is a little bit different than some of the other committees. So I think that comparing it, in fact, in the mind of LAFCO, only one committee is important to the district, and that's the finance committee. So they see it as the number one most important committee that we have. It's critical, and if staff is not working with the committee and providing information to the committee so that the committee can work on the many projects that need to get dealt with, such as problems with our leases, and there's a lot of work that needs to happen that the board simply can't do during the board meeting. That's the purpose of the committee. You would be completely handicapping the finance committee by insisting that staff not have involvement. So that would be a huge mistake, in my opinion, and I don't think that you find that that's normal in other agencies. So generally, a finance committee does have staff at those meetings, and yes, they do.
No, but I'm just saying, a lot of finance committees, you can just Google any agency, their oversight. They oversee the investment policy, they oversee RFPs, they oversee
That's standard.
standard. They don't tell a staff how to format and write a report. That's micromanagement.
So
And-
I got these recommendations
That's okay.
from a CPA, and they're through an association
I
that.
know, I saw actually the same thing online.
Okay, so you know where I got it from.
I know where you got it from, it's from online, but what I'm saying is, I just want to say, since this finance committee has formed, first of all, I don't get any time. I get 12 hours to answer 19 questions that ask for things for 6 years back and 10 years back. This whole thing on item 2, I worked days and nights to do, and everything else stops because there is, you call a special meeting 24 hours, and then the next time I get like a day and a half to produce something else, and I'm working up to the last minute, which is why I was late. So I just want to say I appreciate Nicole's insight because it's very true. And saying to teach staff how to understand a report, that is insulting.
Well, there was no intention of insulting the staff. This was a document that was a recommended
There's also other documents.
outline of things that should be included in a finance committee. So it didn't come from me or Tom. This is what we found to be acceptable and standard with finance committees. We can certainly edit it. I'm not saying I have a problem with that, but I want to point out that, we heard from LAFCO that we need to have our finance committee meetings at a time of day when our finance director and our general manager can attend the meetings. So at our last evening meeting, which was an attempt to outreach to the public, because the public, it's hard for them to come during the day, Tom and I did a poll of everybody in the room to see whether or not they were willing, and if they were going to have a problem, the public was going to have a problem with moving the meetings to daytime meetings, which was the recommendation of LAFCO. And everybody in the room unanimously said that they were fine with having daytime meetings so that we wouldn't, we're trying to work, we are really trying to work with the staff, and I think that it's important that the finance committee work productively with staff, and I know
Can we have more time?
Right.
Can we not get 19 items with 2 days to perform it? I mean, and then the flip side of that is I'm sending you a PDF file at 5:30 at night and your meeting starts at 6:30, which is why you sat in yesterday's meeting saying, I didn't know we had a fund for the office building, because you didn't read what I gave you. It was right here. It's item number 11. And everyone was sat there, everyone that was in the finance committee said, yeah, we don't know where the reserves are, we don't know where they are.
Deborah,
and it was in the packet.
I feel like the way you're speaking to me is insulting.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm just frustrated.
I understand you're frustrated. I heard that at the beginning of the meeting, and I think that, I did see that document, but it wasn't clear to me, the designation, the way the document was worded.
You mean reserve for district office?
The way that it was worded was not clear to me. It wasn't clear to me when I looked at it, but when you did your new list of reserve information, which you provided today in our budget, it was a lot clearer to me how things fit together. So what came out of that was something really useful. And while I realize, the budget, the timing of the questions was very ill-timed given your workload, I recognize that. Never were you given a date by which you had to answer the questions, and I wasn't expecting you to provide the questions in time for that meeting. So I was surprised that you provided them. There wasn't a requirement that you provided.
But the agenda was said to review the responses. So if there were no responses, then how would that have looked?
We would have just moved it to the next meeting. It wouldn't have been a big deal. We would have, when we do this all the time, we would have simply said staff didn't have time to get back to us. This has happened in our other finance committee meetings. Staff hasn't had time to get back to us, so we're going to move this item to the next agenda. And that's all we would have done, because we couldn't have done anything else. So what wouldn't have been any poor reflection on you. I would have explained, look, we didn't give staff very much time to respond, but you basically knocked our socks off because you put together this amazing report back, and it was extremely useful, and we went over all of your responses during the committee meeting, and I think everybody there appreciated the feedback, and it was at that point that it became clear that we really need to have you at those meetings, you know, because we won't have to send you 19 questions. We'll be able to just ask you questions as needed during the meeting, and we won't need to assemble this huge list of questions.
It's getting pretty hot in here.
So, you know, I think that by moving the meeting times to earlier in the day, we will be able to get our work done during the meetings, and you won't be burdened with that sort of backlog of questions. So, you know, I see a positive resolution to that problem, and I think it's simply just having staff at the meetings instead of, it's just very complicated when you're having a meeting, a finance meeting, and you have no one from finance there. All we can do is start asking, you know, putting a list of questions together to get back to you, but I don't expect you to necessarily respond immediately, but I think it'd be much more productive if we could just have the meeting, ask the questions during the meeting, because most of those questions you know the answer to right off the top of your head. You don't even have to look anything, I mean, some of them you do, but you could just talk us through most of it. So
I'm just asking for more time in the future.
Let's try and, all work together on that. And then
yeah,
if
we
there's
can
some
deal with
items
that
on this
through
item
emails, yeah.
You know, if you don't like some of our responsibilities, we'll work real hard to bring them in. This was our guideline to try and guide us, but, you know, if there's.
Well, I
more-
think like it's new, we're working, it's just like the budget, it's changeable, so. fine.
And if there's specific changes that Commissioner David would like to see made to this proposed list of responsibilities, you know, I'd appreciate it if maybe we could get an email back from anyone that has suggested changes, and we could bring this back to the next meeting. I'm not attached to any of this. This is something we got off the internet, you know?
Yeah, the work with staff and work with auditor directly is that part that caused concern, and hearing the frustration from staff even, you know, emphasizes that more. So I can make comments on that in writing, but I think we have to, we established the committees as advisory committees, and we have to make sure that even though when staff has the time to participate, I'm sure they're willing to answer questions when they can. I think it's important that the direction comes through the board and is approved by the board, because otherwise we can run into some serious problems. So
I need you to explain that, because I can't operate in the way that you're suggesting. So the committee might as well just end being a committee. I mean, how could the committee bring back every question they have to the board for approval?
Not the question, the recommendations. For example, the developing useful and readable report format, so that format and the list of reports that you want to see should be compiled for the board, and then the board should discuss and approve it. So we need to have a single message
Everything
from
the
the board.
committee does will have to be approved by the board. That is how our committees are set up. That's why this is being brought to the board right now, because everything that this committee does, we can't take action on anything. We can't vote on anything. All we can do is make recommendations. And right now the committee is recommending approval of these responsibilities. And if some amendments need to be made, then that's fine too. I'm not attached to it. But everything the committee does has to be voted on by the board. That's understood.
I'm more than happy to give you feedback that, you know, shows my concerns for this in writing, and maybe we should just, I mean, I can move to appoint Bart Retz to the as a member to the finance committee, and we take a vote on that.
I'll second that.
Okay, roll call.
Commissioner Bernardo, Commissioner David,
Aye.
Commissioner Matthews,
Aye.
Commissioner Caravana,
Aye.
President Brennan.
Aye.
Congratulations.
Now, is that legal since we didn't agendize it?
Steve's not here.
I see no law of distrust. Next, we have item 6, which is discussion and possible action, executive search committee update, search process, cost of search to date. And we have Commissioner Mateusz and Commissioner David on the committee, and last I heard, Commissioner David wanted to provide the board with an update on the search.
I said I would be happy to give an update at the next meeting. I didn't know that that meeting would be our finance or budget workshop, so I just learned about it yesterday that I was actually giving a report today, so it will be brief. And I want to split that up in two parts. The first one for the interim general manager, and the second part will be for the permanent general manager. So for the interim general manager, we have received 24 applications, and we have read the resumes and did some search and then narrowed it down to 13 candidates that we have interviewed over the phone so far and checked references, and we made 4 recommendations to the board, and Tom and I are happy to announce that there is a candidate interview on the schedule for Monday evening. The board will meet a candidate for the interim general manager position, and with the potential of having the contract approved at the next public meeting on Wednesday, May 6th. We've also done some direct recruitment where we contacted retired city managers or other senior staff at cities where we thought they could help out, and we approached them and to see whether they are available and interested in helping out the Harbor District temporarily. So we've spent quite a bit of time on that task, and are hoping that we can bring the interim general manager search to a conclusion, hopefully next week. Are there any questions for this part?
I have questions, but I'll wait till you're done with your report.
Okay. So for the permanent general manager search, we're moving along right on time. We had a more extensive public feedback process where surveys were posted on our website and at the harbors, I think, and so a lot of members from the public and I think the county supervisors, the MCC, a lot of agencies gave input and what they would desire in a new general manager for the Harbor District. So that made the first phase of the search a little longer, but now we have the advertisements in place. I think they have so far appeared in 12 publications, and there are more to come depending on when they issue their journals. We have actually fresh off the press, we have brochures now advertising the position, so you can pass that along. There will be copies at both harbors and at the district office, and we'll also mail them out to targeted people. I think we have 10 applications already, but we're basically now in the process of building the pool as substantially as possible, and then move ahead with the selection process sometime in July.
Do we have any questions? I got some feedback from one of our supervisors, I'm not going to name who, recently, that he was under the impression that we should have already hired a permanent general manager by now, and that we were way behind in our search for a general manager. So I told him that I couldn't really comment much on it because I'm not on the committee and didn't know the details of the search effort, but that it was my recollection that the expectation was that it was going to be about a 6-month process to solicit and find applicants, and then we were going to be interviewing applicants. And I want to make sure that I'm accurately explaining that. Does that match?
Yeah, absolutely. And whatever the first meeting we had this year, January 7th, I think we approved, and with the contract, we approved an outline that went over, I think, 6 to 8 months for the search. And with this, extensive input from the public, you just need more time to address that and take that feedback into consideration when you design the advertisement. So we were not expecting to hire someone at this point. And of course, the search for the interim general manager that was added onto the task probably took a little bit of time and attention away from the permanent general manager, but really not too much. Brent, Tom, and I, we've done interviews at 7 in the morning to, still be able to complete our daytime jobs, and we've done it on weekends. We've been, we spend a lot of time on vetting candidates, on recruiting candidates, on interviewing candidates, and I think that's for the interim general manager, but for the permanent general manager, we'll invest a lot of time into that too.
It'll be a terrific process. I don't know if it's in our little fancy brochure here, but it's going to be a 3-day vetting process, and a lot of people will get in on adding their feedback on the qualifications and how they feel this person fits in. What are 3 things like real last?
Yeah, so it will be a 3-day interview process that will narrow the candidate pool to 10 candidates, and then 10 candidates will be interviewed on the first day by a community panel consisting of 7 to 9 community members representing agencies and organizations whose opinion we highly value, like the Sierra Club will be represented, the county, the 2 cities. And so this is a community panel that will then
Will the Coastal Commission be represented?
I have not invited them. I could try to get them to come. It's going to be a long day. If you interview 10 candidates, it will likely take 5 to 6 hours. But they will all have to sign a confidentiality agreement because we want to be able to guarantee confidentiality until they make the final round of 3 candidates that is interviewed by the board.
So can I just point something out? What you're talking about right now is sort of like, it's sounding like a unilateral decision by the committee where it hasn't come back to the board for approval.
That was actually a board.
We didn't give any direction on how this process was going to unfold that I recall. So I'm just pointing out that it should come back to the board for a public meeting, not a special meeting, but a regular meeting.
It was discussed at a public meeting on March 30th with Ben Ives. We discussed the process.
At a special meeting at Oyster Point in the harbor master's office with no public members, or very few. I think we need to have more of a public process to discuss, because I think this is, really important for people to know how well vetted these candidates are going to be. We shouldn't be keeping this a secret. We need to get it out there to everybody and let them know what this process is going to be like. So I just want to make sure, because I know you're concerned about committee's authority and overstepping authority by committees. And this committee is working closely with staff, I want to mention. So I just want to, kind of remind you of that. And I think bringing this forward to a regular meeting for more broad public discussion would be healthy for the district, because this is a big process and it's a really important step for the district. And so we want to, there's a lot of gossip and rumor about how this process is being handled, and it's really important that we clear up any miscommunication or misinformation on the part of the public. so that it's a really transparent process. And right now, the feedback I'm getting is that that is not what's been happening here.
Well, it will be in the March 30th meeting minutes, and the summary, the outcome of that the board voted on at that meeting, the majority of the board approved that process, actually developed the process.
How many board members were at that meeting?
You know, we're just getting into such minor details here. It was a public meeting. It was decided we need to move on.
There were 3 board
It
members.
doesn't matter, it still is a legally public.
It may have been a legally public meeting, but we need to do a service
My
to
gosh.
the process and make sure that the public is aware of how we're conducting the process.
We can absolutely do that. We
Good.
we can make it publicly available and advertise it more, the process that is planned. At this point, I don't think the search committee is planning on bringing it back to the board for another decision, but we can definitely,
Well, I have no idea. I don't know what happened. Was this meeting videotaped?
yeah.
I don't know how I missed it. Was it at the harbor master's office?
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of people are wondering why you missed it.
Was it, you sure it was videotaped? Because I haven't seen it.
We have footage of it, and it will be available on the website.
It should be soon. I think what happened was that was the day that our photographer went to a different site and we were using our phones to record it, so it has to be put together yet. Or
Oh,
is it
so the
processed?
board videotaped it. That explains
Staff.
why I've never seen it.
Staff
Public
did
comment?
as a backup plan.
Yes.
Can we have, I would agree basically with Sabrina, and this is one of the most important things in terms of the grand jury report and regaining transparency for the Harbor District. I think it's very important to the community. And I think it would be very beneficial to have a section on the website of here's the process and what we're doing, and then here's where we are in the process of what we're doing.
That's
I think
precisely why I
that's,
brought this up, so that we could inform you, but let's,
I think it's really critical.
yeah,
to
just
communicate
have
about it.
time, we can put it on the website how we intend to do this.
Yeah.
I will give this as, I will give the update and where we are in the timeline at the next meeting under, commissioner reports. I can do that again. And then I will have something in writing that we can, after the meeting, post on the website that will say the same thing.
I'd love to see a timeline and you move the thing where we're
I
at.
put the video on the website too,
Yeah.
like where we can see it along with the application and the information about the position. Because the public needs to be able to see it, the applicants need to be able to see it. I mean, we're supposed to be running a transparent organization here, and I want to see the video. I've never seen it.
Is this on the website yet?
I
No.
just got it in the mail about an hour before it came.
No.
Okay, well, then all we gotta do is put this up and, process.
Yeah.
We're beating ourselves up here all the time.
Amen.
So this is going to come back. Do we need to vote at the next meeting and put this on a future agenda? Or
No,
you?
I can give the report at commissioners' reports.
I really think it needs to be an agendized item where we have a real public discussion about the process, because there are a lot of questions, and the feedback that I'm getting is that the process is broken, and I don't want the public and our fellow elected officials to have that impression. That's not healthy for this district, especially not at this time.
I have a suggestion then. I will give the update at commissioner reports at the next meeting with the written report, and you can right after that request to go on the following agenda for another vote, and we can see if we can get a consensus for that.
Great, that works for me. Okay, so anything else? All right, now we've got item 7, update on forensic IT audit, schedule and cost. And I have received a number of inquiries from public members about the schedule and the cost for the audit, and I know we received that information on the schedule and the cost this week. So Acting General Manager Grimby, can you give us an update on that?
I have no report for this item as it was an action item between the board and our legal counsel and not the staff.
So, were you in on did you get the information about the schedule and
The confidential one, yes.
no, there was another email from,
I don't recall that.
okay. So, my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that the audit is going to be complete,
So
the beginning of June, correct?
I would have to refer back to my other statements. That's between the board and the attorney.
I thought it said May
May,
6th.
Beginning of May, yeah.
beginning of May? Okay, so, end of first week in May, and I would have brought the information if I thought I needed it. And then the other part of that is that the cost, my understanding is the cost for the audit is $12,000. And I want to make that clear so there's no misunderstanding on the part of the public about the schedule and the cost. And if there isn't any discussion of that, we can adjourn the meeting.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Aye.
Can I vote on that?